Ping, I'm live. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. I'm not sure anybody can hear me. The dark plan has returned the same day as the new official June. Could somebody let me know if you could hear me? I'm not seeming to get a little signal down at the bottom here. I'm just curious about that. And so, hi all. Let me just quickly check. Coming in. Sorry, the wee microphone indicator that's down at the bottom here's just not giving me any response. Normally it bounces up and down green. Oh, thank you, Vela. I sound great. That's okay. Happy days. Hello, everyone. How are you all? I hope you're all keeping well. Yeah, new Dune trailer today. Have you all seen it? I was having a wee nosy at it earlier, and I was having a wee look at Quinn's response to it, which is always good. Let me just have a look at your comments, folks. So have you the dog plan is returned? Hi, Joseph. I hope so, but doubtful. Hey, howdy, Doc. Looking better than part one to me, says Bojack. Hi, Bojack. How are you? So I sound great, loud and clear. Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? It's good to be back, to be honest with you. It's nearly a year, I think. And we've had a bit of a year here, and it's, I suppose, just been a bit of a heavy year. And just in terms of dealing with book clubs and the science fiction station, well, basically didn't want to inflict my nonsense upon you. And in terms of sort of doing this work for a wee while, I hit a bit of a wall with it, to be honest with you. So it's really good to get back at it and to have a bit of a get up and go about it again. And I hope you're all keeping well, by the way. It's time has moved on a wee bit. There's Moon the dog saying hello. How are you keeping? Thanks very much for joining us, Moon the dog. It's been a bit of a year, folks, and you're keeping good. Good to hear. I'm glad to catch you alive again. It's a pleasure, says Vela. Thank you very much. As with these book club things, folks, we're putting them all together in a playlist. So as much as it hasn't gone the way I wanted it, doing it kind of almost one a week. It's been a bit sporadic over the last year, but ultimately they'll all be together in the playlist, and you'll be able to run through the whole lot of them. And I've been having a bit of a chat with my wife about it, and especially with me coughing quite a lot through a lot of them. What we think we'll do is we'll maybe edit them a wee bit as well, and repackage them and get them back up so that they run a bit smoother, and we can take out sort of dead space and things like that from them. Excuse me. As you can see, I'm still a bit coffee, but I've got my vital fluids here, keeping up those precious bodily fluids, as we always like to comment. Yeah, the other thing is, I suppose it's been a bit of a year for science fiction, fantasy, and horror, all of the genre fiction. There's been an awful lot that I've been looking at, both, cinema-wise, TV-wise. I've been reading away, and as well. Excuse me. And I'm just very briefly before we get going, I managed to reread all of the Elric books and got through a brand new one. Oh, here we go. We're going to be turning things around here a wee bit soon, so you can see a bit more of all the sci-fi stuff. This was it here, the Citadel of Forgotten Myths, which I picked up recently. Really enjoyed it. It was great, and I think it just fits effortlessly in with all the Elric books. So if anybody's a bit of a Michael Moorcock fan, hasn't read that one, I highly recommend it. There seems to be a good amount of interest in Michael Moorcock again at the moment, which I think's excellent. Excuse me. Keeping excellent. He missed you in the club. The dog says, you want to stop by and say hello. Nice to see you back live again. Got to see a YouTube premiere now, so I don't have much time. See you later. Thanks for popping in, Rue the dog. Take it easy. Vela says, I haven't read Elric and Decades. I should read them. They're a very easy read. I piled through them. So I did. And very much enjoyed them. And it's been a long time. Excuse me. I think the last time I was reading Michael Moorcock I met him in London about 1993 or 94, I think. and I picked up a couple of books off him there and had a good read at them. But I haven't really read much of him since, and he seemed to have disappeared from the bookshops, which I think was very sad. So we'll try and get this throat of mine going. It usually goes a bit coffee when we start, and then it settles. Here's the honey. But yeah, there's Cynthia saying, "Hey Doc, welcome back." Thank you very much, Cynthia. Welcome back to everybody, by the way, who's rejoining us, and anybody who's here for the first time. Thanks very much for joining us as well. And it's really good to have you all back, folks. I think Babs let me know that she wouldn't be able to join us for this live broadcast, sadly, and had been sending me a few sort of interesting comments and stuff, which I wanted to share with you. And so, what? Just before we get back to chapter 43, the return of Gurney Halleck, etc., I'm hoping to do a sort of little live broadcast very soon, covering a lot of stuff, really, just to have a look at everything over the last year. But I'd like to do something specifically on Dune in particular. I thought what would be good was to, separate from the book club, maybe do a little focus on a given character over a live chat and discussion, if you see what I mean. And two in particular that are foremost in my mind. Well, I think three actually that I'd really like to sort of have a good chat about. Leto the first and Jessica, and particularly in relation to myths and stuff. And this is what Babs had been chatting about the relationship between the character of Jessica and the Greek heroine Atalanta, who, if anybody knows who she is a participant in the Caledonian Hunt, and she is also an Argonaut, and she is an incredibly interesting character in mythology. So I was actually thinking about something that Babs had said, that we'd like to have a wee presentation some night and have a chat about Jessica. But before we do, what I thought I'd do was take you through these myths very quickly as presented by Robert Graves and as Apollodorus, and we'll have a chat about her, because not a lot of people know about her, to my surprise usually, but she's a very interesting heroine. Carlos is saying, "Nice to see you back, Doc." Thank you very much, Carlos. Nice to be back. Nice to have you here. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of thinking, I suppose, about Dune and so on, and especially with the new film coming along. And absolutely had a wee look at the new trailer today. As I said that, and again, so it was just a coincidence me popping on, I suppose, back today. But it's nice to see it, and I suppose it's giving us that sense that the film's on its way, isn't it? We're going to finally get to see it quite soon. I know some people do wee countdowns and things like this on Twitter and stuff. But yeah, it'll not be too long before we get to see Dune Part 2, and I'm looking forward to it. Caught a glimpse of Christopher Walken there, being very, very Christopher Walken, which isn't a bad thing, So yeah, I am looking forward to it, and I think this trailer kind of made me go, okay, yeah, I'm looking for it. And then to be able to piece the two together, to be honest, is what I'm really looking forward to. Once I've seen, I'm wondering, I suppose maybe some of the cinemas will put Part 1 on, again, maybe before Part 2. So, but it'd be nice to watch the whole thing, I think, and I'm sure you'd all agree that it'd be good to have a look at it as a complete piece of work, So yeah, very much looking forward to it. I had one little thought before we get into chapter 3, and I've written it at the top of the page here, and it was about the word and I'm going to say the word fauvrelux, okay, and I'm going to talk about the pronunciation of that very quickly. It's a word that I could never find much out about, and I think I've got it actually. I've been doing a bit of reading, and I think also I would be pronouncing it wrong. That it should be fauvrelux, and in fact there is a French word which is fanfreluche. Interestingly enough, here's what it means. It means to make something frilly, or to add frills. And if we consider that, I don't know if that's of any note at all, or if it's got any relation to the word within Dune, because it's an odd word, and the fauvrelux system, etc., with the various houses. I was wondering, is it a bit of a joke, a bit of a pun on the word, if you see what I mean? But otherwise, I don't know if anybody else has any ideas about that word, but it's one that I've been trying to find the etymology of, and I thought that fanfreluche. So it's the same word basically, but substitute the U for the N. I thought, that's interesting. It's very, very similar. Right, folks. I'll tell you what, this is a big chapter, and they're all big chapters. As we head towards the end of the book, we're on chapter 43, 48 chapters in total, and then we'll be hitting the appendices. Excuse me. So as usual, we'll get started. If anybody's got any comments or questions, fire away, please. It always helps with this kind of thing. This is a dense chapter, and I've got plenty of notes on it as usual, but I suppose it's dialogue heavy and it's action heavy. And I suppose it's heading towards this. I suppose we're getting this reuniting of Paul and Gurney here. And I suppose the sort of ultimately this is going to lead to the next chapter with Gurney and Jessica. I suppose the weapon that the the long-term sort of weapon that the of doubt and that the Harkonnen have sown within House Atreides is still at work here. So there's many things kind of going on, and we'll kind of head through it a bit and see how it goes. I'll do my best just to read from my notes to push it forward. And I suppose it's quite dialogue heavy. But yeah. Okay, so let's start off with the epigraph, basically. When law and duty are one, united by religion, you never become fully conscious, fully aware of yourself. You're always a little less than an individual. From Muad'Dib, The 99 Wonders of the Universe, by the Princess Irulan, as always. Excuse me. Law and duty becoming one. United by religion, religion being something that you adhere to, that you stick to. You never become fully conscious. Never there is a Frank Herbert absolute. Fully aware of yourself, and you're always a little less than an individual. Also, another Frank Herbert absolute. Excuse me. Which he's always warning us to pay attention to. Okay, so let's see. We start off here. Our locus is the smuggler's spice factory with a parent carrier and a ring of ornithopters, and they come over a lifting of dunes like a swarm of insects following its queen. So we simile there from Frank. Ahead, we're told, as the chapter begins, is one of the low rock ridges that lifted from the desert floor like small imitations of the shield wall. Dry beaches on the ridge, swept clean by a recent storm. So then we go to this, I suppose this is the command section, isn't it? In the con bubble, or the control bubbles I've written, of the factory, we have Gurney Halleck in command. Excuse me. So we get a wee bit of a description. He leaned forward, adjusted oil lenses of binoculars, examined the landscape. So Frank's painting us a nice little picture again. And beyond the ridge, we're told we see a dark patch, maybe a spice float. And we're told that there's radio silence here. The use of the ornithopter as a language, I've made a note here above this next bit. So he gave the signal to a hovering ornithopter and sent it to investigate. Radio silence, use of the ornithopter as a language, communication, physical is what I've written here. So yeah, here we go. So this is quite interesting. The thopters themselves being used to sort of send signals. The thopter waggled its wings, there's a bit of alliteration there, to indicate that it had the signal. I thought that was quite cool. I've just written that next to it. So it broke away from the swarm, in quotes there, and sped down towards the darkened sand, circled the area with detectors dangling close to the surface. So what we're getting is a picture of spice hunting here from the smuggler's point of view, how they go about this. Almost immediately, he performs a wingtip dip and circle towards the factory. And this is again another signal using the ornithopter to indicate that spice had been found. Of course, this is the trap, isn't it? And it's a bit of a reminder of Gurney and how he thinks, I suppose. So Gurney sheathed his binoculars, we're told, and knowing that the others had seen his signal, he liked the spot. The ridge gave some shielding and protection. So this is this thinking that we have here. It's deep in the desert, unlikely spot for an ambush. Still, he's untrusting. So here we get his actions here. He signaled for a crew to hover over the ridge to scan it, sent his reserves to take up station and pattern around the area, not too high, risk and reason, and he could be seen from afar. They could be seen, from afar by Harkonnen detectors. That's the reason. So we get presented a bit of a risk, the reason for their caution, if you like. And the caution I've made a wee note here, as of course we all know, is an Atreides trait. Carlos says, given the relationship between Paul and Gurney, it struck me as odd that Leto the First never had a Gola made of him. I don't know if, Leto the First never made a Gola of him. Oh, is that Leto the Second? Sorry, I think I misread. Yeah. Maybe Gurney wouldn't have been happy about it. There's Brad saying, welcome back. Look, welcome back, Brad. Good to see you. Yeah. Let me see. By the way, I suppose very quickly, some of the things that I've been thinking about really in relation to Dune, Gurney's character in particular here, my reading, I suppose I didn't get it. I didn't finish what I was reading there. I have been reading Xi Sheng Lu's trilogy. I've finished the first two, Three Body Problem and The Dark Forest, and I'm finished. Here, hang on, Dark Forest. Yeah, and I'm on the third one now. I'm well pushing on with it. Death's End. Highly recommend them to anybody. They're really good. What else? And I have picked up a copy of I Am the Law, Michael Mulcher. But the other thing that I've been reading, I must grab it for it at some point, is the Winchester edition of I've picked up myself a copy of Lamort to Arthur by Mallory. As some of you know, I'm quite fond of the Matter of Britain stuff, and there is a lot of that in Dune. Frank Herbert's quite fond of the King Arthur stories, the Camelot pattern, all of this. And sometimes when we think about Paul's companions, his tutors, Gurney and Duncan, for example, I have been starting to think about them in terms of their qualities, in terms of knights of the Round Table, if that makes any sense. And it's not something I'd sort of done before. So I've been kind of reading away at that, and I'm about a third. I'm reading a fair lot about stuff at the minute, so I'm about a third of the way through that. And I'm just up to Lancelot, basically. Paul's family cautious. His grandfather died. His father died in a gnome trap. Cautious. As I've always said, Brad, the first step in avoiding what is it? What is it? The thing that they say, avoiding a trap is knowing of its existence. But the second step in avoiding a trap is to avoid it. Is not to walk into it. And yes, it's all the bravura, isn't it? It's the showmanship that, there's ego at work with the Atreides, I think. A lot of ego. I mean, everybody in these, if they're royalty, these people, they must have a very big superiority complex as well. But yeah, it's a trait, but I suppose, yeah. Oh, there are many flaws. I think that one of the things I thought about doing with the episode about Leto was really to Leto seems to have become a Father's Day kind of thing, which I think is appalling, because I think he's not the character that's presented on screen. If you see what I mean. But yeah, cautious. Well, here's the caution still. The Atreides trait. Gurney doubted that there'd be that the Harkonnen patrols would be this far south. This was still Fremen country. Yeah, I suppose, I don't know. It's interesting that his thinking's more orientated towards the Harkonnen than it is towards the Fremen. This is Fremen country. I'd be worried about the Fremen, not the Harkonnens. Gurney checked his weapons. damning the fate that made shields useless out here. Anything that summoned a worm to be avoided at all costs. He rubbed his ink vine scar along his jaw, and studied the sea. So, Gurney's strategy here is he decides that the safest thing is to lead a ground party through the ridge. Inspection on foot, still the most certain way. Couldn't be too careful, especially when Fremen and Harkonnen were at each other's throats. So we're getting a wee bit of an update there. Excuse me. Excuse me. So here's the worry, I suppose, about the Fremen. The Fremen that worried him, they didn't mind trading for all the spice you could afford, but the devils on the warpath, as he describes them, if you step foot where they forbade you to go, and they were so devilishly cunning of late, so devils, devilishly cunning, etc. So I quite like this bit. It says it annoyed Gurney. Cunning and adroitness in battle. With these natives, they displayed a sophistication in warfare as good as anything he'd ever encountered. Excuse me. Here we go, I suppose. And he had been trained by the best fighters in the universe. Hyperbole. The unseasoned in battles where only the superior few survived. So I put a wee note here next to this. Well, I've written down wow. Hyperbole is the wee comment I made at the start of it. I tend to make my comments as I go, but I've put down that Gurney's opinion of himself, or the author of this, that is the narrator of the book. And of course, you know, not to say anything against Gurney and his abilities, he is that good in this book, I suppose. But it's an interesting way of looking at yourself, isn't it? He had been trained, and I think by this is our third person omniscient narrator. Pardon me, whoever that is. Seasoned in battle were only the superior few. So this is, again, it's a really interesting question. And you know something? Whenever we get through all 6 books of Dune, I'd love to hear what you think about it. I'd like you to sort of consider over that time, who is the narrator? Who's the author of Dune itself? And considering that the segments are all, you know, headings of that there's a meta-textuality going on here, I think. So Princess Irulan is the person who's writing all of these little things from all of these different books. But Dune itself, I think, is looking back over this whole story and arranging it. And I think there is an omniscient narrator. And whenever we get to the end of this book, I think in the appendix on religion, is it the one that discusses the errors of the Bene Gesserit and the Arrakis affair? That's where I think it's most apparent that you'll see this, you know. There's a couple of comments. Let's see. Frank Red says, interesting how Frank assigns vitality and agency to machines. Yeah, like the thought there's perhaps particularly in consideration of the Butler and Jihad, there is a peculiar vitality and agency to his machines. Particularly the ornithopters. Let me see, how would I put this? Ornithopter is a machine that flies like a bird. Of all the various, I suppose, interesting designs or things that are in Dune, little bits of technology, I've always thought it is one of the most interesting things. And the fact that it is kind of, as much as it's a machine, I suppose the idea of that is to kind of imitate how a bird flies naturally. I've had a look at a few ornithopters just over the last few days. People making them on YouTube and stuff, some amazing ones. There's also a thing, Frank, that as we've been discussing about the use of color within Dune, in particular, whenever we're inside the ornithopters, our coloring is green, you know. So there's definitely and to see the machines here now used in another form. This isn't like signal lights, you know, from an aircraft. This is the pilot's maneuvering the vehicles to as a form of language, as a signal, as a form of communication. So I like the way you put it. There's a peculiar vitality and agency to his machines. Absolutely. Well, they all evolve, don't they? And that's the ultimate part about the butler influence, I think, within Dune. It's good to be back, folks, isn't it? Matt S says hello. Good. It's great to see you all again. It's great to see you too, Matt. Thank you very much for joining us. Absolutely. There's always something here, isn't there? So it was just that. Sorry to stop on that wee bit, but I just thought, yeah, it's a bit of a, I'm trained by the best fighters in the universe. Seasoned in battles where only the superior few survived, and there's that kind of almost survival of the fittest there as well. So I've put back to the action here. So Gurney again scanned the landscape, wondering why he felt uneasy, and perhaps it was the worm that they'd seen, but that was on the other side of the ridge. So we have the factory commander here, whose head pops up into the comm bubble beside Gurney, and the factory commander, we're told, is a one-eyed old pirate with a full beard, type, blue eyes, and the milky teeth of a spice diet. By the looks of it, there we go. We have another side effect of spice, not just the blue eyes, the eyes of a bat, etc., but we've got milky teeth of a spice diet. So the factory commander says, "It looks like a rich patch, sir. Shall I take her in?" Gurney says, "Come down at the edge of that ridge. Let me disembark with my men. You can track her out the spice from there. We'll have a look at that rock." "Aye," says the commander. "In case of trouble, save the factory. We'll lift in the thopters." So again, planning for a way out, I suppose, in the event of something bad happening. And we're told the factory commander, saluted. "Aye, sir," and popped back down his hatch. I think that if you filmed that right, it's kind of, hello, could be done quite comically, I suppose. Not that there's anything humorous here, really. It's just the way Frank describes it. I just visualized it that way. I thought it was kind of funny. So again, he scanned the horizon. His thoughts here are that it's hard to respect the possibility that there were Fremen here, and he was trespassing. Fremen worried him. Their toughness and unpredictability, many things worried him, but the rewards were great. And I've written here next to this one, you like this, also Atreides thinking. So just as much as we were, who was it was saying about Brad talking about the Atreides being cautious, they're greedy as well. I think the rewards were great. Atreides thinking, and the fact that he couldn't send spotters high overhead worried him too. The necessity of radio silence added to his uneasiness, building up tension here with quite nicely. So let's see, we got smuggler, spice factory. So the factory crawler, we're told, turned and began to descend. We're going to see a bit of, I suppose, the start of a bit of mining here, but we have a lot of details about the spice factory here, which I think, again, if we're having a wee look at the tech and the ecological stuff within Dune, this is kind of interesting. So we're told the factory crawler turned and began to descend. It gently glided down to the dry beach and foot on the ridge, and where its treads touched the sand. So Gurney opened his bubble dome and released his safety straps. So the instant the factory stopped, he's out, slamming the bubble closed behind him, scrambling out over the tread guards to swing down to the sand and beyond the emergency netting. So we're getting a build-up of the details of this spice factory here. The 5 men of his personal guard were told right with him, emerging from the nose hatch. Others released the factory's carrier wing, which detached and lifted away to fly in a parking circle low overhead. We're told immediately the factory crawler lurched off, swinging away towards the dark patch of spice out on the sand. The thopter swooped down nearby, skidded to a stop, and was joined by 2 more thopters. We're told this disgorged Gurney's platoon, and then these lifted up to hoverflight. So really just very businesslike. It's a nice wee way of fitting in a lot of these little details. If you're I suppose there's little things like this, if you're an artist or something like that and you're wanting to sketch and draw the things from Dune, these would really help you fill out your imagination and sort of paint the picture of the whole thing about the spice factory. I think it's really good. Nice little bit of description by Frank. Carlos says, I always envisaged ornithopters as dragonflies. You wouldn't believe this, Carlos. I've got this wallpaper right in front of me. You can, this one here at the back. This is my kind of office where I would teach kids and stuff. And it's got all sorts of, I suppose it's mostly in French, etc., but it's got all sorts of waltzes on it. But just reading off the section above me, it says ornithologique, ornithologiste, ornithomancie, ornithomuseum, and ornithophile is the little bit all in French, and then it gives you all the definitions in French. So of course, ornitho is bird. So no, I was a bit, I suppose the David Lynch, they were just kind of looked a bit like, I thought the ornithopter almost looked like, what did it remind me on? It reminded me on the owl, the mechanical owl from Clash of the Titans. But its wings didn't move, and I just thought that they went with the ornithopters. It just kind of looked a bit like a bird. Absolutely, the ones in the film at the minute are like dragonflies. Which is, I suppose that's it's the kind of I think they didn't get that quite right. They should fly like a bird. There are have a look on YouTube, guys, and people making them out of elastic bands and stuff, and off they go. And they're really pretty actually when you watch them fly, and some of them are really, really good. But ornithopters ornithopter is something that flies like a bird, and the clue's in the name, But it's one of those things, I suppose. But it's whenever you read a book, Carlos, you see how you imagined it, how you envisaged it. It's fine. It's when we all read a book, if we read about these things before somebody puts it on a big screen or something like that. I suppose that's the kind of sad thing about cinema, in a way, is that it creates a confirmed vision of this is what it looks like, And prior to that, if something only exists in a book and you read it, it's your imagination that dictates, and the author's words, really, how the author paints a picture. But it's your imagination that fills in the gaps. So I'm sure a lot of things in Dune would have looked very different to all of us until we've seen them on the screen, And I think the David Lynch film is so iconic in many ways that the still suits and things, and they're not very much like in the book at all, really, But they're and it would certainly have informed how I thought of particularly the Fremen for a long time, It's interesting that. Let's see. Where did we get to? Discourse Gurney's platoon. Yeah, so Gurney has a personal guard. He's a man of importance here, isn't he? And he should be if he's one of the best, best fighters, military commanders, etc. in the universe. So we're told Gurney tested his muscles in his still suit, stretching. He left the filter mask off his face. I've put a wee sort of Chekhov's gun there. Losing moisture for the sake of the greater need, which is the carrying power of his voice if he had to shout commands. It also, I think, it's the author setting this up here allows Paul to easily identify him, though I suppose with Paul's abilities that might not be necessary. Oh, a few more comments here before I'll read them just before I pile on here, so we don't get too far behind. Connor Quinn says, I was disappointed to not see any poison snoopers. Matt S says, according to Jodorowsky, I don't need to read Dune to make a movie of it. I've seen the documentary, the Jodorowsky's Dune. It's very entertaining. Jim McFerrin says, dread to say I missed you, Doc. Another invasive staff night out. I'm beginning to notice a pattern. We'll catch up the stream tomorrow. Bon voyage. No problem, Jude. Thank you very much for joining us. Frank says, I thought Villeneuve's Thopters were very impressive visually and sonically, but seem a strange deviation given that they totally contradict the original concept and name. Yeah, I think it's just to look cool, really. It's Frank says, thanks for reminding me of the use of the green and the thopters. Very interesting. Another concept in the same vein might be the still tent with its sphincter. We've talked about that a lot, Frank. We have, and I suppose it's even in the PhD videos, the sphincter. The sphincters, etc., represent rebirths, etc., but it's also to do with an almost identical scene in Frank Herbert's first book, The Dragon in the Sea, where the Fenian ram is launched, if you like, and it's kind of it's a birthing. Yeah, it's very interesting. And Paul has multiple births, but particularly the sphincter in the tent, I suppose, as he goes into it, is one thing, and when he comes out, he's another. You know, but yeah, we've had a good that's we've had a good chat about that actually. He began climbing up the rocks, checking the terrain, pebbles and pea sand, the smell of spice. And Gurney's thoughts here: it's a good site for an emergency base. Might be sensible to bury a few supplies here. Thinking of the future here. Of course, if it's a good site for an emergency base, I'm sure somebody else has probably thought of that. Gurney looking at Gurney's men. He glanced back, watching his men spread out as they followed him. They were good men, even the new ones. We're getting this set up as well. Even the new ones he hadn't had time to test. We're told not a shield glimmer on any of them, which would be quite right. No cowards in this bunch. I would be worried about a coward carrying a shield anyway. I thought everybody would have shields policed off them at this kind of point by Gurney. So, no cowards in this bunch carrying shields into the desert where a worm can sense the field and come to rob them of the spice they found. So we go to his point of view. From slight elevation, from slight elevation in the rocks, he could see the spice patch half a kilometre away and the crawler nearing its edge. So he's gone up and we're getting a bit of a panoramic view. He glanced up at the cover flight, noting its altitude, not too high, nodded to himself and turned to resume his climb. And here we go. Action is what I've written with a bit of Bangaria, the attack. So this just erupts. In that instant, the ridge erupted. Nice little short sentence for effect there. 12 soaring paths of flame. And I've just written next that sounds very religious, very mythological. Excuse me. 12 soaring paths of flame streaked upwards to the hovering thopter and carrier wing. There came a blasting of metal from the factory crawler and the rocks around Gurney full of hooded fighting men. Gurney had time to think, basically, by the horns of the Great Mother. A little religious reference there within the Dune universe. Interesting with the horns there, I suppose, as well. Let me see if there's something on that. Did it very quickly within the back of the book. Should know how to be nosy about this. Hang on, looking up the wrong thing. Let's have a look. Great Mother. So the Great Mother is the horned goddess, the feminine principle of space, commonly Mother Space, the feminine face of the male, female, neuter trinity, accepted as supreme being by many religions within the Imperium. So interesting that, I think. And a sense that the Great Mother, that this triumvirate, I suppose, this trinity, is a Janus aspect, male, female, with a neuter in the middle. I think it's very interesting. And if you consider that, I suppose, almost the way you would have it with interlocking circles, then you would have horns in it if you drew it. It's in the representation of that. So Gurney's just his little religious reference there. By the horns of the Great Mother, rockets! They dare to use rockets. And I was thinking about again, is this an evolution of warfare on Arrakis? And I was thinking about, of course, that we've had the Harkonnen use artillery. So then he's face to face with a hooded figure, crouched low, crysknife at the ready. Two more men stood waiting on the rocks above, to the left and right. Only the eyes of the fighting man ahead of him were visible to Gurney, between hood and veil of sand-coloured burnous. But crouch and readiness warned him that here was a trained fighting man. The eyes were blue in blue of the deep desert Fremen. Yeah, nice little bit of alliteration there and stuff. There's some good writing in this chapter. Gurney moved one hand to his own knife, kept his eyes fixed on the other's knife. They dared use rockets. They'd have other projectile weapons. This moment argued extreme caution. He could tell by sound alone, we're told, that at least part of the sky cover had been knocked out, gruntings to the noise of several struggles behind him. The eyes of the fighting man followed the motion of his hand towards his knife, back to glare in Gurney's eyes. So that's as much. This is Gurney able to tell what's going on around him, but he's not turning to look. He's 100% focused on the eyes of this man. It's just, I suppose that's letting us know that he is acting with extreme caution, is in the moment. And the man, which we of course know is Paul, said, "Leave the knife in its sheath, Gurney Halleck." And Gurney hesitated. The voice sounded oddly familiar, even though through the stillsuit filter. Gurney says, "You know my name? You've no need of a knife with me, Gurney." He straightened, sheathed the crysknife beneath the robe. "Tell your men to stop their useless resistance." The man threw his hood back, we're told, and slung his filter aside. The shock what Gurney saw froze his muscles. And I think this is one of the great moments in Dune, isn't it? It's though at first a ghost image of Leto the First. So for a moment he thinks it's Leto. Then full recognition came slowly. "Paul?" whispered then louder. "Is it truly Paul?" And of course, "Don't you trust your own eyes? They said you were dead." Rasped and took a half step forward. "Tell your men to submit." Move towards, and the man Paul came out and moved towards the lower reaches of the ridge. So Gurney turned, reluctant to take his eyes off Paul, saw only a few knots of struggle. Hooded desert men everywhere around. The factory crawler lay silent, Fremen atop it. No aircraft overhead. They've been hit hard here, haven't they? "Stop the fighting," he bellowed. Took a deep breath, cupped his hands for megaphone. "This is Gurney Halleck. Stop the fight." Slowly, warily, we're told, the struggling figures separated, eyes turning towards him questioningly. "These are friends," he tells them. And someone shouts back, "Fine friends, half our people are murdered." "It's a mistake," says Gurney. "Don't add to it." So quite a pragmatic and intelligent response there, because there are going to be a lot of tempers here. He turned back to Paul, stared into the youth's blue Fremen eyes. And Paul, we have, again, quite a nice wee bit here. Smile touched his mouth, a hardness in the expression, and it reminded Gurney of the old Duke, Paul's grandfather. Gurney saw a sinewy harshness in Paul, never before seen in an Atreides. A leathery look to the skin, a squint to the eyes, a calculation in the glance that seemed to weigh everything in sight. "They said you were dead," he repeated. And it seemed the best protection to let them think so. It's a strategy. Gurney realized all the apology he'd ever get for being abandoned to his own resources, left to believe his young Duke, his friend, was dead, and wondered if anything was left of the boy that he'd known and trained in the ways of a fighting man. So it's it's quite pragmatic, and there's nothing to be, feeling sorry for yourself or anything like that. You shouldn't. I suppose the words there, abandoned to his own resources. But again, I suppose this is the understanding that Paul is Gurney's feudal lord, isn't he? Yeah. And Paul, this is just this bit, I suppose, and we'll stop and have a wee look at the comments here, folks. And of course, Paul steps closer to Gurney, found that his eyes were smarting. Gurney, it seemed to happen of itself. They were embracing, pounding each other on the back. feeling the reassurance of solid flesh. You young pup, Gurney man, Gurney man. You know, I always love that. Paul's response, and of course, I think it's very well. Patrick Stewart does it really well in the David Lynch film, doesn't it? Really gets that going. And presently, they step apart and look at each other. So this is a great moment in the book. You know, for all of us who are invested in our hero, everything that's happened, and Gurney has up until now possible futures, and maybe Gurney's alive, maybe he's not. He's definitely alive, and we have him reunited with Paul. And it's you know, it's almost like getting the band back together again. This thing, as we head towards the climax of the story, you know, what another hero has arrived to take up the fight. It's very much in that sense, and I do kind of look at Gurney in a wee bit as a bit like that in the way that this works as one of the Knights of the Round Table. And in relation to Jessica, by the way, later on, especially how some of the knights treat Guinevere within the Arthurian myth can be, I suppose, overlapped on this. Now, let's just back up a wee bit, folks. So just, again, it's a dialogue and action heavy, but this represents a sort of natural little break in the story. Sorry, in this chapter. Let's have a wee look. Connor Quinn says, funny enough, I just reread this chapter after seeing the trailer. Keep it up, Doc. Thank you, Connor. And Cindy says, Paul is playing with Gurney here. Don't you trust your own eyes? Just after he deceived the smuggler with a false spice patch. Was it there? Yeah. Deception is the basis of warfare, isn't it? The basis of all warfare. There is something playful about it, I think. And I also think that there, Cynthia, we've been constantly sort of it's subtly reminded that there are possible futures, that Paul has seen possible futures with Gurney in them, I think. Excuse me. It's been a wee while back, but so it's kind of something that I think it's anticipated. And at the start of this chapter, it's one of those things, oh no, you know, there's a fight going on, we hope it doesn't go too badly, and it doesn't. I suppose not for the important characters anyway. We do have a little death toll coming up in this chapter, with our little skulls as usual. Let me see, yeah, on down a wee bit, I think, when we do a bit of a tally. Excuse me. So no, it's a very good young pup, Gurney man, and it's in the language of the book, I suppose, in the language of the Imperium, and very much Atreides, you know, and they do have genuine affection, I think. Gurney is going to be, I think, whenever we move into Dune Messiah, Stilgar, I think, ultimately is the most important character in terms of critiquing Paul and Alia. But Gurney also represents a kind of, I suppose, an inside-outside view, if you like. And Gurney is very, very loyal, and I think so is Stilgar. But there's aspects of Paul's character once he is the Emperor, I suppose, that are, it's Gurney and I think Stilgar are the best people, amongst the best people to have a look at him. And we'll see a bit of Gurney's character here, I suppose, as well. So they step apart, look at each other. Gurney takes a breath. So you're why the Fremen have grown so wise in battle tactics. I might have known. They keep doing things I could have planned myself. If I'd only known, if you'd only got word to me, nothing would have stopped me. I'd have come a running and excuse me, I'm going to take a wee sip of honey here. That's the wee bit that made me laugh. And I've put laugh out loud. And I'm just going to say this, that I think, please remember that Frank is writing this book in the 50s, not the 60s. Sorry, he is writing it in the 60s, but he starts in the 50s. And I don't know, for any Americans out there, I thought that was a bit of an Americanism. And it just reminded me of, some of those, I'd honk my horn and my gal would come a-running. And it's the language, that's what it reminded me of. And a bit of a bromance perhaps there. And I don't know, it's maybe just something. I'm from Northern Ireland, as I'm sure you know. It's maybe just, I always thought that kind of, I'd pull up outside the house and honk my horn, and my gal would come around. And it's very kind of, I thought, kind of 1950s twee all American pie kind of thing, if you know what I mean. So apologies. It's not meant in any offensive way. It's just what it reminded me of. And I come around and dot. And I've just written laughing at it because I did. It's something me and my wife would joke about now and then. You know, I think it's quite funny. Looking in Paul's eyes, it stopped with hard wearing stare. Decide, sure, there you go. And of course, that's the point. And there have been those who wondered why Gurney Halleck went a running, and some would have done more than question that they'd have gone hunting for answers. So absolutely right. If I let you know I'm here, you would come around, and I'm sure you're probably being watched, which is also a bit of a, hang on, what? Oh, so he probably is being watched, and as we know, he is. So there's a little bit of dramatic irony there, I think, as we get on. So the concern that Paul, yeah, it's almost paradoxical, isn't it? If we think about it, I'm not going to let you know that I'm alive in case you have spies following you. I've bumped into you by accident. Hello, but you must have, by that same thinking, you must have spies following you. If that's the case, I don't know. So if that is the situation, that the spies will follow Gurney no matter what, then I would have just sent for them. Possibly, the stratagem is to remain hidden, though, isn't it? Let's see, just backing up a wee bit. Paul is playing with Gurney here. Don't you trust your own eyes? That's just what Cynthia's comment just after he deceived the smuggler with a false spice patch. Frank says, what do we think of male, female, neuter trinity? With Frank's Jungian interest, I think of enantiodromia and the ideas of binary polarized ones and twos creating a transcendent third by their constant and constructive tension. Yeah, it's there's no black and white. There's always gray, if you like, and that they're absolutely, Frank. There's tons of Jungian stuff in there. In particular, we've talked about this a fair bit. There's a couple of if you have a look through the PhD videos, you'll find stuff on this. There's this idea of that Dune, the book itself, is a Janus aspect. Janus is a Roman deity that January is named after Janus, and is often a two-headed representation, if you like. So it is. It's a kind of male, female, neuter, black, white, grey, if you like, but there's a fair amount of young in it, and but we've had a good wee chat previously. We've got out some of these Jungian mandalas and so on, and Frank actually writes the book this way. And I'm no big expert on young Frank, by the way. The stuff that I've really just looked at is the stuff that's really relative to Frank Herbert, which that particular. Let me see. Have I got the book? Well, this is what we do here, isn't it? I will get you the book. Hang on, it's got to be sitting here somewhere. The good book for that is Volume 3 of Young's work, which is a lot of stuff. But let me see, because that's the problem I have. I suppose read what you've got to. But it's there we go. It's there we go. Bear with me a wee second. There we are. That's the one really for in terms of. Now there's obviously other stuff to do with Young that influences Herbert, but it's particularly this stuff. So this is the archetypes and the collective unconscious, and I think this is volume. Let me see. Oh no, sorry. This is the collective. This is the Bollinger. Sorry, Bollinger. My head's away today. Bollingen series 20. This is the collected works of Carl Gustav Jung, volume 9, part 1. Is the archetypes and the collective unconscious. Sorry, I was calling it volume 3. I was thinking of something else. So particularly the stuff that's really influential on Frank, I think this book is a very and you'll see worms and all sorts of stuff in here. Some of the mandalas, and I'm trying to. If you'd have to find it in my PhD, I can't remember offhand, but we do have a quote. I think it would be from. I don't think it's William Tupalt. I think it's probably from Timothy O'Reilly's book. I think that, or it might be in The Makers of Dune by Frank Herbert, which is edited by Timothy O'Reilly. But he discusses his writing process with how he writes. He talks about haikus and Jungian mandalas, etc., etc. So, there's a few of them as well. There are quite a lot of them in this. This book's got an awful lot of plates in it. Let's see, etc. So that's your book for the major Jungian influence, I think, on Herbert. It's interesting stuff. I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of. If you know me, I'm not a fan of psychology in general. And there are major flaws in Jung's work, and there are major flaws in Freud's work in particular. And they are to do with iconotropy, I think. So it's one of those things in terms of classical mythology and the ideas that they have from it. But there we go. Frank says, "Loved your analysis of Dune's Jungian elements." Oh, you've seen them? Excellent, Frank. I mean, it's brief. I had to throw so much stuff out. The idea of the quaternities and mandalas composed of characters is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Well, I thought that was fascinating. Frank says, "We'll definitely have to go and watch again later this to find those quotes. Interesting to see the worms in there. The quotes will be referenced. So at the back of every video, there's little green numbers that pop up on the screen as I'm reading the stuff. The references are at the back of each episode. Yeah, let me see. It's one of those things, Frank. I'll tell you what's great about it is that there are a bunch of writers around this time, and they're trying really weird and quirky things in relation to their writing. So I can't mind if you goodness, let me see. Tell you what, hang on. Everything should be at my fingertips. Let's go get it. We'll just let's see. Where would we be? Right. Institution PhD. Where did you go? I'll get that quote. There we are. Would that be it? Right, there we are. Found it. Bear with me a wee second. The good thing about having particularly unusual words in a document like this, it makes them easy to find. Where are we? Find. There we go. That's where I say the word haiku. I'm pretty sure. There we go. Here we go. Just to give you the quote, folks. Let's see. And it's 291. What's it from? It's from, sorry, folks, it's from The Road to Dune by Frank Herbert, Brian Herbert, and Kevin J. Anderson, published by Hodder and Stout. And this would be on page 213. So this is Frank talking about how he wrote Dune. Much of the prose in Dune started out as haiku and then was given minimal additional word padding to make it conform to normal English structure. I often use a Jungian mandala in squaring off characters of a yarn against each other, assigning a dominant psychological role to each, and implications of color, position, word root, and prosodic suggestion. All are taken into account when a scene has to have maximum impact, and what scene doesn't if a book is tightly written. I think that's a great little thing there from Frank. And that's quirky, isn't it? It's an interesting way of writing. There's a few writers around at this time who are doing all sorts of weird things. Anybody who knows a wee bit about Philip K. Dick, for example, well, he again, sometimes I think of these things as being in a similar vein. But he was writing, there were other sci-fi guys doing this as well. He was writing books using the I Ching, this form of divination, this oracle, if you like. And there we go. Something just popped up down there. I think it says ads will run shortly for some viewers. I've never seen that before. Hope that doesn't interfere with anybody's enjoyment of it, of this. Let me see. So yeah, interesting to see the worms in there. Absolutely, there's loads of stuff in there, and I think it's pretty interesting actually. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of strange imagery within Dune as well, I think. But yeah, a lovely wee sort of scene there. Let's see where we're at now. Sure. Oh yes, of course. So Paul nodded, glanced to the waiting Fremen, looks of curious appraisal on their faces of the Feda king. He turned from them back to Gurney, finding his former swordmaster filled him with elation. A genuine bit of happiness for Paul here. He saw it as a good omen. And I put in brackets after that, superstitious. A sign he was on the course of the future where all was well. That's again, we have an absolute. So this is what we were talking about a wee bit prior to this, is that Paul has seen Gurney in some different futures. Seeking him out, I think, would have caused problems, as we pointed out here. But this is one of the futures where Gurney is now by his side, and it's kind of on the road to the right outcome as far as what Paul's after. Where all was well, as we call it, another wee absolute there. Paul's thoughts here, with Gurney at my side. And he glanced down and studied the smugglers that had come with Gurney. How do your men stand, Gurney? They're smugglers all. They stand where the profit is. Little enough profit in our venture. He noted the subtle finger signal flashed to him by Gurney's right hand. Hands are important in this book, I think. The old hand code. Out of their past. Danger. Here were men to fear and distrust in the smuggler's crew. Paul pulled at his lip to indicate he understood, and looked at the men standing guard above him. He saw Stilgar. Memory of the unsolved problem cooled some of Paul's elation. Stilgar, this is Gurney Halleck, of whom you've heard me speak. My father is master of arms, one of the sword masters who instructed me, an old friend. He can be trusted in any venture. I hear you are his duke. And there's a bit of frostiness going on here, and it's almost like two different, you need to be this guy's friend because he's my friend kind of thing. There's something kind of childish about this, I think, as well. And it's a wee bit endearing, I think. Paul stared at Stilgar, wondering the reasons why he had said just that, his duke. There had been a strange, subtle intonation in Stilgar's voice, as though he'd rather have said something else. It's not like Stilgar, a leader of Fremen, a man who spoke his mind. Gurney's thoughts, my duke, and looked anew at Paul. And again, yes, with Leto dead, the title fell on Paul's shoulders. So the pattern of war in Arrakis took new shape, we're told, in Gurney's mind. My duke. A place dead within him began coming alive. Only part of his awareness focused on Paul's orders. Only part of his awareness focused on Paul orders smugglers disarmed until they can be questioned. A place dead within him. And I thought that's he's beginning to come alive again. So it gives us a sense of how much this has affected Gurney. And we're told that his mind returned to command, heard some of his men protesting, shook his head, whirled. Are you men deaf? This is the rightful Duke of Arrakis. Do as he commands. And grumbling, the smugglers submitted. So Paul's next to Gurney, and he said, I'd not have expected you to walk into this trap, Gurney. And I put next to this might, I'd like to see what you think, folks. I've just put next to that, why not? And in fact, quite frankly, I would have expected Leto to walk into this trap. And it's just, why wouldn't you have expected him to walk into the trap? He did. And again, is this an Atreides? Looks a bit like it looks very dodgy. What the heck, if it looks like a trap, smells like a trap, it probably is a trap, I think. Of course, it's a wee bit amusing, I suppose, but that was just my own comment. Why not? Gurney says, I'm properly chastened. So he should be. I'll wager you yon patch of spice is little more than a sand grain's thickness, a bait to lure us. And of course, Paul says that's a wager you'd win. So we've actually, what we've got to see, although we're really, is the strategy, a strategy that the Fremen used to attack Harkonnen, smugglers, etc., baiting them with spice. Spice that's just very, very thin, just a little bit on the surface, nothing really there. That's a wager you'd win. Look down at the men being disarmed. Are there any more of my father's men among your crew? None. We're spread thin. There are a few among the free traders. Most have spent their profits to leave this place. But you stayed, says Paul. I stayed. Because Rabban is here. I thought I'd nothing left but revenge. An oddly chopped cry we hear on the ridgetop, a Fremen waving his kerchief. Paul says, a maker comes. And not some more signals, etc. here. Excuse me. So he moved out to a point of rock, and Gurney followed, looking off to the southwest. We see the burrow mound of a worm seen in the middle distance. Its dust-crowned track cut directly through the dunes towards the ridge. He's big enough, says Paul. We're told there's a chattering sound. The factory crawler below had turned on its treads and lumbered towards the rock like a giant insect. Yeah, a number of insecty kind of, I suppose, similes, etc. in this chapter. Too bad we couldn't have saved the carryall, says Paul. Gurney glanced at him and looked back. Patches of smoke and debris out in the desert where the carryalls and ornithopters had been brought down by Fremen rockets, and he felt a sudden pang for the men lost. His men. Your father would have been more concerned for the men he couldn't save. And I put next to this, I agree. And Paul shot a hard stare at him and lowered his gaze. They were your friends, Gurney, I understand. To us, though, they were trespassers who might see things they shouldn't see. You must understand that. I understand it well enough. Now I'm curious to see what I shouldn't. And I've just put next to that, as I'm a bit of a fan of Sledgehammer, but my little note next to that is enough warmth. I understand it well enough. Yeah, they were your friends. They're dead. Fine. It's one of those things. It's I understand it well enough. And they're dismissed pretty much, aren't they? Now I'm curious to see what I shouldn't. So what's this been all about then? On we go. So Paul looked to see the well-remembered wolfish grin on Halleck's face, ripple of the ink vine scar along the man's jaw. Gurney nods towards the desert below. The Fremen are going about their business, and it struck him that no one worried about the worm. So the thumping sounded in the open dunes beyond the baited patch of spice, and a deep drumming seemed to be heard through their feet. Gurney saw the Fremen spread out across the sand in the path of the worm. So here we have a worm turn up. And again, some good description here, I think, from Frank. We're told it comes on like a great sandfish, cresting the surface, rings rippling and twisting. So again, a lot of these kind of descriptions would evoke kind of water, wouldn't they? Almost that inversion of a big fish coming out of the sea. Resembling a great sandfish, rings rippling and twisting. In a moment, Gurney saw the taking of a worm, daring leap of the first hookman. Again, the details, the turning of the creature, way the entire band went up, scaling the glistening curve of the worm's side. Paul said, there's one of the things you shouldn't have seen. So Gurney's response here, and again, we'll push on with the dialogue, folks, here. There have been stories and rumours, but it's not a thing easy to believe without seeing it. Shook his head. The creature all men on Arrakis fear, you treat it like a riding animal. And of course, Paul says, you heard my father speak of desert power. This is it. The surface of this planet is ours. No storm, no creature, no condition can stop us. I've always thought this, folks, and it is amusing that, of course, Shai Hulud is also Shaitan. That the duality of the Fremen, the way they worship this aspect of God, if you like, it's always amused me that the Fremen's deity is also their public transport service, basically, as well as their kind of war wagon, if you like. Matt S says two Atreides walk into a bar. Finish that one for me, Matt. I'd like to hear the punchline. Oh dear. Is it the first step was being aware of the bar? That's probably, yeah. Dear oh dear. Where are we? Let's see. So it's a bit of catch up, and we get to see a bit of, this is the mystery. Snubballs, and of course, Gurney's thoughts here, us, and he means the Fremen. He speaks of himself as one of them. His young master has gone native. Again, looked into the spice blue of Paul's eyes, his own eyes. He knew that had a touch of colour, but smugglers could get off world foods, and it was a subtle caste implication in the tone of the eyes. Just say that again. It was a subtle caste implication in the tone of the eyes amongst them, and by them that means the smugglers. I think that's an interesting thing. And so this has got to come back to the Faufreluche, as I'm going to call it from now on, system, which is the case system of the Imperium. So let's just say he knew that he had a touch of the colour, but smugglers could get off world foods, and it was a subtle caste implication in the tone of the eyes amongst them. They spoke of the touch of the spice brush to mean someone had gone too native, and always a hint of distrust in this idea. So I think all of this, Gurney's thoughts here, how he's looking at Paul, fresh for the first time. He's seeing his young pupil as a man here, basically, as a guerrilla warfare leader, as a religious leader, an icon, and he can see the changes in him. But that's another little bit of knowledge about the Imperium and how its caste system works, and that's even with the smugglers. I suppose the interesting thing is essentially within the Imperium of the Dune universe, the Faufreluche system means that if your father is a duke, you'll become a duke. If your father is a carpenter, you'll become a carpenter. This kind of thing. And of course, we have the Tuics, don't we? If you're a smuggler, and I think that this is kind of weird. I think in a way that smuggling in a black market is probably a highly active part of the Imperium's economy. The idea that the smugglers are part of that caste system, I think, is really interesting. The smugglers are not outside the Faufreluche. Gurney Halleck is the one character in Dune that seems to be outside of the Faufreluche system, and that he has moved between professions, which is not meant to happen. So it's just a little thing, I think. The touch of the spice brush, I think that's quite is that a euphemism? I suppose it's certainly a colloquialism or something like that. It's a way of putting it, but you've had a bit too much spice down there. You've gone a wee bit native. A distrust in people who do this. This is within the smuggler community, Does one have a duck on it? Excellent. Oh dear. My favorite walking into a bar joke is the dyslexic walked into a bra. I think that's my favorite one of those. No offense to anybody with dyslexia at all. It's just a good joke. The hotel. I don't know if you saw, folks. By the way, just pausing for a wee second. I posted a couple of wee pictures up on the community page there. It's just I have had a wee holiday. A few things have happened, I suppose, but it was a few sci-fi things that I saw when I was on holiday. But the hotel that I've been staying in across the road is a gigantic building that says Atreides on it, which is quite interesting. Let me see, what John Klein's plane in Amsterdam. Kind of spoiled the quiz, didn't I? Trying to figure out where I've been. Anyway, So yeah, an interesting thing there, a very subtle little indicator about the caste system there. On the go, Paul says there was a time when we did not ride the Maker in the light of day in these latitudes. So there's a change here. But Raban has little enough air cover left that he can waste it looking for a few specks in the sand. Your aircraft were a shock to us here. So everybody's been a wee bit surprised here. Gurney's thoughts, to us. To us. And he says, of course, we weren't the shock to you that you were to us. What's the talk of Raban in the sinks and villages? So, of course, this is Gurney's quest for personal revenge here. They say they fortified the Graben villages to the point where you cannot harm them. They say they need only sit inside their defenses while you wear yourselves out in futile attack. In a word, they're immobilized. Yeah. That's the last thing you want to be in warfare. Mobility is the key. And if you can't move and your enemy can, you're in big doo-doo, if you see what I mean. In a word, they're immobilized, while you can go where you will. It's a tactic. I mean, all of this kind of stuff's in Sun Tzu's The Art of War, by the way. If anybody wants to read it, it'll take you about 20 minutes. It's worth a wee read. It's a tactic I learned from you. They've lost the initiative, which means they've lost the war. Gurney smiled, a slow, knowing expression. Our enemy is exactly where I want him to be. Well, Gurney, do you enlist with me for the finish of this campaign? Enlist? My lord, I've never left your service. You're the one that left me. There's that wee childish thought comes in again. And of course, we go back to that. I'm not going to get any more of an apology. I think this bit's very interesting. I'm just going to read this again, and I'll tell you why. My lord, I never left your service. You're the one that left me. To think you dead, and I being cast adrift, made what shrift I could, waiting for the moment I might sell my life for what it's worth, the death of Raban. So, in that aspect, being cast adrift, I've put next to that Ronin as a masterless samurai. And I believe, let me just double check this actually, because it's been a long time, but I believe the word itself means adrift on the waves. If I'm not altogether losing my marbles, let's find out. Yeah, so just quickly checking on Wikipedia, Ronin is a drifter, wanderer, literally a person of the waves, was a type of samurai who had no lord or master, and in some cases had also severed all links with his family or clan. A samurai becomes a Ronin upon the death of his master or after the loss of his master's favor or legal privilege. In modern Japanese usage, it says usually the term is used to describe a salaryman who is unemployed or a secondary school graduate who has not yet been admitted to university. Oh, that's kind of brought it down. It just says breaking it down with the etymology, by the way, which we always like. Usually translate the drifter, wanderer. However, per kanji, ro means wave as in body of water or unrestrained, while the nin, ronin, a bit means man or person. It is an idiomatic expression for vagrant or wandering man, someone who finds the way without belonging to one place. Here's something interesting. I did not know this. It says the term originated in the Nara and Heian periods when it referred to a serf who had fled or deserted his master's land. In medieval times, the Ronin were depicted as the shadows of samurai, masterless and less honourable. It then came to be used for a samurai who had no master, hence the term wave man, illustrating one who is socially adrift. There we go. Very interesting stuff. Samurai culture, Japanese culture in particular. I think Edo period Japan's fascinating. Tinos, it was hard to pop in to say hello at work, so can't stay too long. Hello, Babs. Thanks very much for being here. Thanks very much for popping in. It's lovely to have you here. It's a dense chapter, and we're piling on through. We were having a wee chat about setting up wee episodes for live discussion, I think, and obviously finishing off the book club's a priority. But we were talking about your idea about looking at Jessica and Atalanta. And so I was saying, I think I'll maybe do a few episodes where we can have a chat about particular characters. And I thought what would be very good to do with that in relation to your thoughts about Jessica and Atalanta, Babs, is what I thought we would do is when it comes to this, what I'll do is I'll dig down Apollodorus and Robert Graves, and we'll read. It won't take too long, by the way, but we'll read to you all the complete myths in relation to Atalanta, and we'll even have a look at Graves's notes on it, etc. And the Caledonian Hunt is the myth. She's a very interesting character. The female Argonaut as well. And of course, if we swap the word boar for bull, as Babs has pointed out, Caledon is Caladan in particular. So there's a lot of Greek stuff overlapping. Leto and Jessica, and in themselves are a Janus character. And many aspects of Leto, I think, are actually, overlap the name Leto. I suppose, of course, we know it's a female goddess. Jessica carries a lot of those attributes as well, of the Greek divinity Leto, I think, in particular, and especially in relation to her children, which of course are Apollo and Artemis, which are Paul and Alia. Yeah, so thank you very much for joining us, Babs. I hope work's going okay for you, not too dull. If the day goes quick, it always goes well, doesn't it, I think? So nice. It's your idea, Babs. So thank you very much. Yeah, there's loads of stuff like that. But as I said, we seldom really stop. And as much as the book club is one thing, let's get the hell through June. It would be nice to sit and have a talk about certain characters and really get to have a natter about them. And I thought it would be nice to do with Leto the first. I thought it would be, particularly with your idea with Jessica, I thought, especially because we're hitting that with Jessica and Gurney in the next chapter. And I think there are other characters that she's based on as well. I'd say there's very much shades of Lady Macbeth and who was I thinking on? Guinevere as well. And there's a few other. I'm trying to remember the name of in fact, hang on, I'm going to look this up very quickly. I'll have to look up Chrysippus. Oh, there he is. Not the philosopher. Oh, for goodness sake. Hang on. The other one. Hang on, excuse me. Chrysippus of Elis, that's it. Sorry, just my memory's away with this one. What's her name? Hippodamia. Is that her? Hang on, I got the right down. Yes. Hippodamia. Who is the mother of oh goodness, Atreus and Thyestes, I think. There we go. Actually, it's being slow. That's why I've had time to pop in tonight. Excellent. Well, maybe not, I suppose, but it's all good, I suppose, isn't it? But no, thanks very much for joining us, Babs. It's excellent to have you here. And we've got, as always, just constantly finding stuff about Dune. We were having a wee chat earlier about the word fanfreluche, the French word fanfreluche, in relation to the Faufreluche system. Well, frills not really important, is it? I think they're not. The idea that the whole caste system, if that makes sense, that all of the little people aren't important, just frills on the edges of the Imperium, they don't matter. The little people get slaughtered in their billions in this book, and they don't matter to the Atreides. And as we can see here, Gurney's rather very, very pragmatic about all his dead friends here. I suppose what else can he do? So yeah, to think you dead and I being cast adrift made me what shrift I could, waiting for the moment I might sell my life for what it's worth, the death of Ravan. I think that to me, I've written Ronan in there in my own little notes, and I think it really does. It's the words in particular there, and Frank is pretty well aware of Japanese culture. He's writing in haiku, before he shifts these. Stretches out his writings with these mandalas and so on. So I just thought of Gurney as a bit of a Ronin here. But he's been reunited with his master. He's now a samurai again. Does that make sense? Not that he is one, but so embarrassed silence settled over Paul. Let's see. The death of Raban has been fueling Gurney pretty much nothing else. So a woman climbing over the rocks towards them, eyes flickering between Paul and Gurney, and she stopped in front of Paul. Gurney noted the possessive air about her and the way she stood close to Paul. Paul says, Chani, this is Gurney Halleck. You've heard me speak of him. Chani looks at Gurney, back at Paul. I have heard. And again, with caution here. Where did the men go on the Maker? Paul asks her. They but diverted it to give us time to save the equipment. Well then, and he broke off and he sniffed the air. There's wind coming. And a voice called out from the ridge top above them, Ho there, the wind. So Gurney saw the quickening of motion amongst the Fremen now, rushing about with a sense of hurry, a thing that the worm had not ignited. Fear was brought about by fear of the wind. So sometimes my notes, I scribble things down before I can be bothered to finish the sentence. So as I'm writing this down, a thing that the worm had not ignited, I scribbled down fear, and of course Frank just says that for me right after. So there we go. The factory crawler, we're told, lumbered up onto the dry beach below them, and a way was opened for it among the rocks. And the rocks closed behind it so neatly that the passage escaped his eyes. This kind of thing in Dune, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Arabian Nights, the Tales of the Thousand Night and One Night. For anybody who loves these kind of loves fantasy fiction, you should read these things. This is very reminiscent of that, things like Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, this kind of thing, Open Sesame. But particularly, we talked about how we visualize things, and I suppose it's, how well we understand or have, I suppose, mental pictures of Arabian culture, if you like. But I love the Arabian Nights. I'm still working. I'm on the third of. I have the collected lot over 4 big volumes, and I'm on well through the third one. So I'm hoping to finish it sometime this year, and I've finally read them all. Let me just catch up with your comments there. Frank says, regarding native, earlier in the chapter we read, it annoyed Gurney, the cunning and adroitness in battle of those natives. In a previous stream, you observed it is literally to be born somewhere. That's right. That's correct. You're a native is where you're born. So is Gurney annoyed not necessarily solely because he begrudges, assumes an antagonistic role in relation to the Fremen, but because he envies or admires their being native to Arrakis and the advantages this gives them, for example, military in this scenario? That's a good point, Frank. The smugglers themselves, I suppose, Gurney's ended up with the smugglers. The language of, for example, of the touch of the spice brush, that's something that's not going to have been in Gurney's vocabulary, I suppose, prior to him being with the smugglers. He definitely admires them and fears them and doesn't understand them, I think. He's careful, he's cautious. Going native, we hear this a lot. It's a kind of thing about usually, but I suppose soldiers who are sent against indigenous peoples, this kind of thing, you end up protecting them. That sort of thing. They're often accused of going native, aren't they? This kind of thing. So it does, to me, have a military. Does that make sense? When someone goes native, I usually associate with a military person, to be honest with you. And you see, I know people like that throughout history, and it's not how I would describe them. If you want to talk about, for example, Lord Byron's relationship with Greece, with the Hellenic Republic, and how the people of the Hellenic Republic look at Lord Byron, you can get the same thing down in Arabia with Lawrence. T.E. Shaw, T.E. Lawrence, gone native. Generally, it's usually within the context of great brutality, that kind of thing. It's a funny term. Nations, to be a nationalist, for example, is a form of prejudice again, where you're prejudiced in favour of people who are born in the same place of you. That's it. And everyone who's not born, if you get my drift, it's kind of funny. It's one of the things we have in Northern Ireland here. Nationalism is kind of stupid. It really is. But not annoyed necessarily solely because he begrudges, assumes an antagonistic role in relation to the Fremen, but because he I think they're doing business with the Fremen, but I think that the interesting thing that Gurney points out is that there's kind of two kinds of Fremen here, really, but there's a level of fanaticism and danger with a certain group, others that we can trade with that want to trade are fine. So it's kind of, I imagine it's kind of a bit stepping gingerly with them, if you know what I mean. Like if you know, what kind of Fremen are we dealing with? Is it the people of Sink and Graben or the wild Fremen, you know? Frank says, absolutely, we could compare Leah Kynes' attitude to Gurney's as two off-worlders as regards going native. Well, yes, of course. The Kynes family going native. The Kynes family really, we've got plenty to say about them. I think they're ultimately Leah Kynes, I think, is the great villain of the piece. And again, we'll get whenever we get to the first, something I'm really looking forward to, Frank, is that we made a conscious decision not to read Appendix 1 first, because Appendix 1 is a prologue to Dune. And we really, if you read it first, you're set up, you understand what's going on. But we decided to go with the way Frank intended it. If you see what I mean, that you'll hit Appendix 1's not an appendix that you're going to reference as you read Dune. It's not got the terms of the Imperium. It's not for flicking, and it has to be read. And it's a mini adventure, featuring Pardo Kynes, and Pardo and Leah, So going native, yeah, Leah isn't an off-worlder, correct? Sorry, I meant Pardo and Leah. So he's born there, but Pardo is absolutely an off-worlder, isn't he? But it's a Pardo went native and Leah named after Uliat, isn't it? The guy that kills himself. It's a very odd thing. I've put a lot of thought into the character of Uliat over the years. Whenever we get to him in that appendix, I think it's interesting, and I don't know if it messes with him. At the same time, I've actually seen behavior like that not too long ago. So I've often commented that I didn't think it was that realistic, and I've changed my opinion on that. There we go. Oh, right. Hang on. Let's see. Where are we? So yeah, reminding me a wee bit of the Arabian Nights. I think, the rocks opening and closing, open sesame, all of that kind of stuff. And I think the Arabian Nights do influence Dune heavily. Have you seen many such hiding? Have you many such hiding places? Gurney asks. Many times many. Looks at Chani. Find Korba. Tell him that Gurney has warned me there are men amongst the smugglers' crew who are not to be trusted. So we see a bit of Korba here. Korba is important and quite important in Dune Messiah, I think, and it's worth paying attention to him in this book if you know that. So Chani looks at Gurney, but back to Paul, and she's, what was this? Oh, she's off gazelle-like agility. Excuse me, I've sent me paperweight flying here. I was just going to see what that was, because my handwriting's appalling. That's number 58. Just before, where are we? Oh, right, okay. Sorry, she looked once at Gurney, back to Paul, nodded, and was off down the rocks, leaping with a gazelle-like agility. She is your woman, Gurney says. Very possessive. The mother of my firstborn, one child. At this point, Leto the second. There's another Leto among the Atreides. We often talk about why is Leto the second, not Leto the third. And my usual suggestion towards that is that Leto II didn't rule. So if you see what I mean, Leto Jr. Gurney accepts this with a widening of eyes, and Paul watched the action around him with a critical eye. A bit of colour coming in here with Frank here. Curry colour, dominates the sky. We've had this before, I think. Fitful bursts of wind whip dust around their heads. Seal your suit. Fasten mask and hood about face. And of course, Gurney obeyed, thankful for the filters. So, I might have missed something there, didn't I? Quite possibly the bit where he gets some filters, I think. Which of your crew don't you trust? Gurney. Here we go, straight to the business. And this is quite interesting. I think we have a bit of we're heading towards another confrontation here within the chapter. There are some new recruits, he replies, off-worlders. Had hesitated, wondered and used the word, hesitated and wondered at the use of this word, off-worlders. The word had come easily to his tongue. Gurney's about to go native, I think. Paul says, yes. They're not like the usual fortune hunting lot we get, they're rougher. Harkonnen spies, Paul asks. I think, my lord, that they report to no Harkonnen. I suspect they're men of the Imperial service. They have a hint of Solus Secundus about them. Sardaukar, in other words. That's exactly what Paul shot a glance at him. Sardaukar. Gurney shrugged. They could be, but it's well masked. Paul's thoughts here. He noted how easily Gurney had fallen back into the pattern of Atreides' retainer. With subtle reservations of differences, but Arrakis had changed him too. Two hooded Fremen, were told, emerged from broken rock below, and they began climbing upwards, a large black bundle over one shoulder. And Gurney says, where are my crew now? Paul tells him that they're secure in the rocks below us. We have a cave here, and our location, of course, is the Cave of Birds. We'll decide what to do with them after the storm. And a voice from above calls, Muad'Dib. So Paul turns and saw this Fremen guard motioning him down to the cave and signaled that he'd heard. Gurney is studying with a new expression. You're Muad'Dib? You're the Will o' the Sand? Paul says it's my Fremen name. Now, Will o' the Wisp, Will o' the Sand, if you like. I don't know if anybody remembers Will o' the Wisp, a brilliant kids cartoon with Kenneth Williams, wasn't it, doing the voice? One of those evil Edna and all that stuff, wasn't it, I think? Will o' the Wisp is a really good wee cartoon that used to be on the BBC. All right. Yeah, very, very good. Will o' the Wisp, Will o' the Sand here, I suppose. The Dune version of that. That comes from, hang on, what have I written down here? Latin, Will o' the Wisp. Ignis Fatuus. As in the singular, a Will o' the Wisp is an Ignis Fatuus. The plural is Ignis Fati, which is a bog, swamp, or marsh gas. The words actually are the Latin means like a giddy or foolish or silly flame. Isn't that good? Silly flame, a giddy flame. Possibly a type of evil spirit. So there's all sorts of things about will o' the wisps, etc. over the years, and it's another name for Paul, the Will o' the Sand. Interesting. So Gurney Halleck, Paul said it's my friend, turning away, felt an oppressive sense of foreboding. Half his crew dead on the sand, the others captive, did not care about the new recruits, the suspicious ones. But among the others were good men, friends, people whom he felt responsible. So it's he's not that just dismissive, I think, of the people he's lost. This is a wee point where I'm going to run quickly to the loo and refresh my glass, folks. But just to let you know, there's our little skull, and it has half of Gurney's men. It's our first little death tally here in the book, in the chapter. So if you'll just forgive me for a wee moment, I'll be right back, and we'll get on with this very big chapter. Excuse me a wee second. Hi, folks. Hope you can hear me okay. Just back. I just have no idea what it means. Right. If I recall correctly, excellent. IIRC. I'm really bad at acronyms, folks, these days. Oh dear, oh dear. So yeah, there we go. Half of Gurney's men dead. Where are we? What did I do with that? Turn the page. That's what I did. Right. But they were good men, friends, people who he felt responsible for. We'll decide what to do with them after the storm, what Paul had said, Muad'Dib had said, and Gurney recalled the stories of Muad'Dib, the Lisan al-Gaib, how he'd taken the skin of a Harkonnen. How he'd taken the skin of a Harkonnen officer to make his drum heads. I just put next to that William Wallace question mark. How he was surrounded by death commandos, Feda King, who leaped into battle with their death chants on their lips. Him. I love that word, him. Dun, dun, dun. If anybody loves Captain Chaos as much as I do, it's him. Captain USA. Sorry, off I'm on. Him, single word, powerful, religious. The words that we're getting describing Paul, he's the willow, the sand, he's Muad'Dib, he's the Lisan al-Gaib. He has death commandos. He has skinned a Harkonnen officer to make his drum heads. I think William Wallace's scabbard for his the name what about Great Sword or Claymore was taken from the. I suppose there's a myth about it. I don't know if it's true or not. From the skin of one of his enemies, I believe. It's a bit. It's one of those things, pure psychological warfare, isn't it? Do you think Herbert's formula of paired quadratized characters could apply to Leith and Gurney? I suppose they're both contrastingly liminal. I think it does apply to all the teachers of Paul, if that makes sense. Gurney is outside the Landsrat, and the smugglers are a fluid faction amidst the big players. Leith is an Araking native and Fremen leader, as well as an imperial agent of high rank. Both as mentors to Paul, they square a certain circle to recall the mandala. The other thing that often bothers me about the Pfeifferish system, Frank, within that's just something that you've pointed out. Leith is an Araking native. He's also an imperial citizen. He's a person who serves two masters, as it's pointed out. But Leith is the planetary ecologist of the Imperium because Pardo is his father, and it's because he's his son. So when Leith dies, Chani should become the planetary ecologist. And of course she's not. And again, that's part of the role of the world. So the interesting thing, I suppose, about that is the problem with caste systems like this is actually when a particular family gets wiped out or something, then the loss of skills. I've actually lost my wedding ring again, folks, and I don't know if you remember all the way back when we started out, that my wife found it, and we were rather overjoyed about it, and it's somewhere in the house. But my wedding ring, it was made by a particular set of jewelers in Birmingham, as far as I understand. And they're an old family of jewelers, and the ring that I have is a Celtic knotwork made in two types of gold, and it's a waveform, and it's very hard to get things like that these days. And simply for the fact is that the number of people with the skills that want to make them, and the families pass them down generationally, but there are new generations of kids, they don't want to learn it, they don't want to go back into these trades. So certain techniques and skills, particularly in traditional jewelry making like that, are being lost, if you like. Some things profit by a caste system, most don't, I think. Both as mentors to Paul, they square a certain circle to recall the mandala. Yes. Do we think characters could apply to Leith and Gurney? I do. I believe all of the characters in Dune, all of them, are created this way. And again, I think we have Frank's word for that. So it's as he said, they're opposites, pairings, and within as you point out, the quaternary nature of the circle, compass points, if you like, etc. And I think we've done a few wee bits and stuff. I flicked open that book before, but I think and a lot of those archetypes, by the way, are actually Jung's, aren't they? I think they're his own illustrations, but there are so many of them, and I only just showed a few, but you would definitely get a sense of Dune from some of these. If you look at that one there, if you consider the emperor on the lion throne at the top, we have a bird, we have a snake, and we have a lamb, and the world is serpent. Some of the color ones are fantastic. There's so many of these in here. And not that I'm a particular fan of Jungian psychology, I do love these. I think it was a very talented artist, and some of the symbolisms and stuff. Not that this is particularly to do with any given thing here, but absolutely, they're fascinating. And I would say if you'd read Dune, there's the level of the esoteric nature of Dune, etc. There's a lot of the color ones there, I suppose, very quickly. But and they're excellent. Quick flick. So understanding particularly things like this here, and of course how that sort of ends up developing into things like the monomyth idea and stuff like that. I think it's quite fun. But yeah, they're exquisite. I dare say, archetypes and the collective unconscious Carl Gustav Jung. But probably type in mandalas on YouTube, or not YouTube, on just on the search and have a look, and you probably get to see. There's a lot of them. But yeah, absolutely. If you've read Dune, they definitely evoke. I get a sense of that what we see in Dune, not from, that Frank could very easily have done that, and it does make sense. And I think if you're writing, it's an interesting technique to pair off, to create protagonist and antagonist, if you like, and that they're not just sort of one-to-one relationships within those. There are different ways that they work, and particularly with the Janus aspects of the characters within Dune, there are absolutely tons of them, Frank, and archetypes. The book's riddled with them. They all are. So it's one of those things. I've often said this, Frank. There are different ways to read Dune, and the way we're hitting it this time is just, I suppose, as a general hit, and I'm more sort of focusing on how Frank writes and little things that he does, and we try to explain key terms, anything linguistic or referential in it, but you can read it from an ecological point of view. Read Dune as an ecological book. You can read it as from a psychological, from a Jungian point of view, and if you're well versed in the mysteries of Jungian psychology, you'll see it all over the place. I think you can read it from an evolutionary point of view, which is the dominant thing, I think. And you can look at it. There are many different ways of reading this book. If you want to focus on one particular way, But of my work, kind of just sort of touched on all of that stuff, and it's definitely there's a PhD out there for somebody, and the Jungian influences on Frank Herbert's Dune or something like that. To really take it apart and study it. It's definitely something I would recommend, just to help us all understand it a bit better. But yeah, there's so much to it, isn't there? Him. Does anybody know who I'm talking about? Captain Chaos from is it the Cannonball Run? Not it Cannonball Run 1 and 2. Or is it? Yeah, that's it. There's a Dom DeLuise. It's okay. Him. So just him. Single word, powerful religious is what I put there. And this is Gurney's thoughts here. Drumheads and death chants. He's painting this isn't a child anymore. In no sense of the word is he a normal man either at all. I think he's becoming a myth. He's a religious figure, I think, to the Fremen at this point. So two hooded Fremen climbing leaped lightly to a shelf in front of Paul. The dark-faced one is Stilgar. All secure, Muad'Dib. We best get below now. Paul says, right. So Gurney notes the tone of the man's voice, half command, half request. This was Stilgar, another figure of the new Fremen legends. So it's all very mythical and legendary. And of course, what you don't know, rumor and imagination amplify myth and amplify stories and things like this to the point where they become legends and myths. So Paul looked at the bundle the other man carried. Corba, what's in the bundle? 'Twas in the crawler. It had the initial of your friend here, and it contains a balisette. Many times have I heard you speak of the prowess of Gurney Halleck on the balisette. Gurney studied the speaker, seized the edge of a black beard above the still suit mask, the hawk stare, the chiseled nose. You've a companion who thinks, my lord. Thank you, Stilgar. Next chance we get, folks, I think I've got a couple of wee tunes for you. I managed to pick this off, pick up a wee mandolin. Well, not a mandolin, what do we call it? A ukulele. I got a wee uke. And I'll have no idea how to play it properly, but I've got a wee tune. Ooh. There we go. Channeling a little bit of James Horner. I'm just mucking around on it, but I've been trying to. I don't know if you could hear that at all. But we were working on a wee guitar tune for the station with some words for it. which you never know, we might be able to present to you at some point. I can't sing a note, unfortunately. But just in honor of Gurney's balisette there, I would, if I was in the desert, I'd like a very short, portable one, I think. And it feels right that this warrior troubadour has been reunited with his rather large, heavy instrument, I think. Seems a strange thing to take about in the desert, particularly if you look at musical instruments that exist within desert cultures. They're not quite like that. The heat would be extremely bad for that instrument. I can tell you, heat's not good for guitars and those kind of instruments at all. They warp, which is not good. There we go. But you have a companion who thinks, my lord. Thank you, Stilgar. A little bit of mutual appreciation. Stilgar signalled for his companion, which is Corba, to pass the bundle to Gurney. Thank you, Lord Duke. His countenance earns your admittance here. And I've just put next to that, that's not nice. And again, it's a little bit childish. We're told Gurney accepted the bundle, but puzzled by the hard undertones in this conversation. An air of challenge about the man, and wondered if it could be a feeling of jealousy in the Fremen. Here was someone who'd known Paul in times before Arrakis, a man who shared a camaraderie that Stilgar could never invade. So there is something about the I don't know, possessiveness of friendship, if you like, that you would get in young, and in teenagers and kids like that. He's my friend, this kind of thing. And of course, the response to that is of course the mutual fan club. It's time for you two. You're two that I'd have to be friends, Paul says. So Gurney says, Stilgar, the Fremen is a name of renown. Any killer of Harkonnens I'd feel honoured to count amongst my friends. Will you touch hands with my friend Gurney Halleck, Stilgar? And Stilgar slowly extends his hand, gripped the heavy calluses of Gurney's sword hand. There are few who haven't heard the name of Gurney Halleck. Released the grip, and turned to Paul. The storm comes rushing. Sense of urgency. Paul says, at once. So Stilgar turns away and led them down through the rocks, twisting and turning path into a shadowed cleft, and it admitted them to a low entrance to the cave. Again, this is the Cave of Birds. So the men hurried to fasten a door seal behind them, sorting out their moisture discipline, and sorting glow globes. Show broad dome ceiling space, the raised ledge on one side, and a passage leading off from it. So again, Herbert setting up the wee scene here for us. Paul leaped to the ledge and Gurney behind him, and he led the way into the passage. Others headed for another passage opposite the entrance, where Paul leads the way to an anteroom and into a chamber that has dark wine-coloured hangings on the walls. We can have some privacy here for a while, Paul says. The others respect my... And he's cut off. An alarm symbol goes off, and it clanged from the outer chamber, followed by shouting and the clashing of weapons. So we have more violence here. Paul whirled back to the atrium lip above the chamber. We have Gurney behind him with weapons drawn, and beneath him on the floor of the cave, there's swirled a melee of... I've got a possible misprint here. Let me just find out. We'd like to point them out because we find a lot of them. It says a melee or struggling figures in my copy. Let me just see. I'm working with this copy of the text, which is the 50th anniversary edition. So this wee comments on page 452 of this one. Let me see. Beneath them on the floor of the cave swirled a melee or struggling figures. I think that's of struggling figures. So just to let you know, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that's a misprint. Yet another one. So I think it's a melee of struggling figures. Paul stood an instant assessing the scene, separating Fremen robes and burkas from the costumes of those they opposed. His senses were told his mother had trained to pick out the most subtle of clues and picked out one significant fact. The enemy wore smugglers' robes, but the smugglers crouched in trios. back into triangles when pressed, a habit of close fighting that is the trademark of the Sardaukar. We're often told about the triangular structure being the least stable, is what Frank Herbert thinks politically. And we have it, I suppose, in with the Sardaukar. It's a symbol associated with them as well. Still, let's just catch up. Frank says both his members of Paul. Stilgar Cynthia says Stilgar finds Gurney's balisette a gesture of acknowledgement to soften his earlier response. It is also a reminder to Paul of the Jamis duel when Stilgar was the leader and Paul the youth. Excellent, Cynthia. Tara says, I'm off. You all have a great weekend. Thanks very much for joining us, Babs. Take it easy. Hopefully we'll chat soon. Frank Red says, see you, and you too. Frank says, quickly on Jung's art, his Red Book or Liber Novus has some great art of chthonic worm serpent-like creatures and even a prophet who mentors Jung in the desert. Excellent. I'll do a research. I don't have a copy of that. I'll have a wee nosy to see. I do like mandalas. And that kind of spirals and things like that. Excellent. So yeah, if anyone wants to check these out, Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, Volume 9, didn't I say? And Frank saying the Red Book, Liber Novus of Carl Gustav Jung. Check out his mandalas and artwork. You'll see it. Yeah, the map of Arrakis is a mandala as well, Frank. So they're all over the place. The Jung stuff's very heavy, very heavy. Yeah, I certainly enjoyed reading up on it. I had another book on it. Let me see. I don't know if it's here or not. I'll see if I can find it maybe for the next time. But there was another book that I kind of used on Jung, and then I actually just used his own work. Really, go straight to the horse's mouth, if you like. But I'll see if I can. It's around somewhere. We're still in the process of trying to get this house sorted a bit, I'm afraid. So that, yes, the triangle, the trademark of the Sardaukar. Fedaykin in the crowd saw Paul, and his battle cry was lifted to echo in the entire chamber. Muad'Dib, Muad'Dib, Muad'Dib. And another eye, we're told. I also picked Paul out. A black knife came hurtling towards him. Paul dodged, heard the knife clatter against stone behind him, and glanced to see Gurney retrieve it. The triangular knot's being pressed back now. So Gurney held up the knife in front of Paul's eyes and pointed to the hairline yellow coil of imperial color, the golden lion crest, multifaceted eyes at the pommel, Sardaukar for certain. Lions and eagles, kings and emperors, generally often represented by these animals. Paul stepped out onto the lip of the ledge. Only 3 Sardaukar remained, we're told. Excuse me. Bloody rag mounds of Sardaukar and Fremen lay in a twisted pattern across the chamber. Hold! The Duke Paul Atreides commands you to hold, shouts Paul. And the fighting wavered and hesitated. Paul again. You Sardaukar, by whose orders do you threaten a ruling duke? And quickly, as his men started to press in around the Sardaukar, hold, I say. One of the cornered trio speaks then. So who says we're Sardaukar? Paul takes the knife from Gurney, holds it aloft. That's us, basically. This says you're Sardaukar. Then who says you're a ruling duke, says the man. And Paul gestured to the Fedaykin. These men say I'm a ruling duke. Your own emperor bestowed Arrakis on House Atreides. I am House Atreides. And the Sardaukar stood silent, fidgeting. So this has got them a bit. Paul studied the man. He's tall, we're told, flat-featured with a pale scar across half of his left cheek. Anger and confusion are betrayed in his manner, but still there's that pride about him, without which a Sardaukar appeared undressed, and with which he could appear fully clothed, though naked. Interesting way of putting it. So Paul glanced to one of his Fedaykin lieutenants. Corba, how come they do have weapons? Corba again. They held back knives concealed in cunning pockets within their still suit. I think, is that cunning? Let me check my book again. cunning pockets. It is. Paul surveyed the dead, and we're told, dead and wounded across the chamber. He brought his attention back to the lieutenant. There was no need for words. The lieutenant lowered his eyes. Where is Chani? He waited with breath held for the answer. And we're told that Stilgar spirited her aside. Nodded towards another passage, glanced at the dead and wounded. I hold myself responsible for this mistake, Muad'Dib. Hang on, what have I got here? I've got another mistake in the text, folks. Let me see, number 81. No, maybe not. I've put it should be a comma. I hold myself responsible for this mistake. Full stop. Muad'Dib is in my text. And I thought that that's a misprint. I think it should be a comma. I think it should be, I hold myself responsible for this mistake, Muad'Dib, if you see what I mean. Again, I don't know what kind of, if anybody's keeping a wee eye on the misprints. We've had a bit of fun with those. Excuse me. But yes, my copy seems to have had a fair amount of them. So, how many of these Sardaukar were there, Gurney? Gurney replies 10. So we've got our little, there we go. We keep a track. Rest in peace, 7 Sardaukar, as we like to do. Paul leaped lightly to the floor of the chamber, strode across to stand within striking distance of the Sardaukar spokesman. We have the Feda King here being quite unhappy about this. I think there's a tense air came over them. They did not like this, the fact that he's exposing himself to danger. This is the thing they were pledged to prevent, because the Fremen were to preserve the wisdom of Muad'Dib. Also, Chani's being mollycoddled, isn't she? She's being protected. She's being spirited away from the fight. She's not, she's too precious. I think it's kind of interesting to see how she's being treated here. And you kind of would expect Chani to be in there with a knife. Without turning, Paul spoke to his lieutenant. Again, this is Corbett. How many are our casualties? So 4 wounded and 2 dead, Muad'Dib. And again, we have, once again, we like to do this. There's our wee skull, 2 Fremen, RIP. We keep a wee tally because little people aren't important in Dune, as we like to point out, and they die by their billions. So we're paying attention to this. Paul saw motion behind the Sardaukar. Chani and Stilgar standing in the other passage, and returned his attention to the Sardaukar, staring into the off-world whites of the spokesman's eyes. You, what is your name? The man stiffened and looked left and right. Don't try it. It's obvious to me that you were ordered to seek out and destroy Muad'Dib. I'll warrant you were the ones suggested seeking spice in the deep desert. A gasp from Gurney, like, yeah. Brought a thin smile to Paul's lips, we're told he's guessed correctly. The blood suffused the Sardaukar's face. He flushed. I asked your name and called up the subtleties of voice. Tell me your name. And of course, this is Captain Aram Sham. I'm going to have a chat about this name in a second here. Captain Aram Sham, Imperial Sardaukar. The man snapped. His jaw dropped, stared at Paul in confusion. The manner about him that had dismissed this cavern as a barbarian warren melted away. Now, before we get at him, Aram Sham, right. Let's have a look. There's often, the names in this book are often loaded. Aram Sham, I thought, is very similar to Shamaran, which is a combination of the Persian word Shah, which of course king, leader, etc., and Maran. Put the two of them together. Shamaran is a king of snakes. Interesting enough, though, it's also in Armenian and Indo-Iranian and Turkish folklore a half woman, half snake. So not necessarily king, but I think is that a slight about Shamaran. Aram I have here is Aramaic and Hebrew origins and translates as high or elevated. And Sham, another name for the Levant area as well, and or Syria under Roman rule. But in particular, king of snakes, I thought it's an interesting word, and Frank didn't just pick it out of thin air. Now, obviously, Shamaran, we swap them around. is basically all I could find on that in terms of the etymology. So, well, Captain Aramsham, the Harkonnens, Aramsham perhaps would be better. The Harkonnens would pay dearly to learn what you now know, and the Emperor, what he wouldn't give to learn, and Atreides still lives, despite his treachery. The Sardaukar captain, we're told, glanced left and right at his two remaining men, and Paul could almost see the thoughts in the man's head. Sardaukar did not submit, but the Emperor had to learn of this threat. So the Sardaukar is reasonably smart here. If he can get out of here, his Emperor needs to know this information. Paul, still using the voice, submit, Captain. The man at the captain's left leaped without warning at Paul. He met the flashing impact of his captain's own knife in his chest. The attacker hit the floor in a sodden heap, his knife still in him. Little skull, one more Sardaukar. There he is. I decide what's best serves His Majesty. Understood. And of course, there's only one other Sardaukar remaining with him. But the other Sardaukar soldier, shoulders slumped. Okay, and basically, drop your weapon. And the Sardaukar obeyed and returned his attention to Paul. So the Sardaukar's trying to be clever here. He's playing the long game. He's doing his duty by the Emperor, I think. I have killed a friend for you. Let us always remember that. And that's an attempt at camaraderie or some kind of excuse. It's something desperate about it. But you killed your friend. It's got nothing to do with me, as would have been my response. Always remembered. Why? Paul says to him, of course, you're my prisoners. You submitted to me. Whether you live or die is of no importance. So it's a bargaining thing there. It's just let us always remember that it's an attempt to remain in control, and he's not. And Paul pretty much puts him in his place. He motions the guards to take the Sardaukar away and signals to the lieutenant, which is Korba, who has searched the Sardaukar. And Paul bent towards his lieutenant. Muad'Dib, I failed you. And here we go. Bit of a speech from Paul here. The failure was mine, Korba. I should have warned you what to seek. In the future, when searching Sardaukar, remember this. Remember, too, that each has a false toenail or two that can be combined with other items secreted about their bodies to make an effective transmitter. They'll have more than one false tooth. They'll carry coils of sugar wire in their hair, so fine that you can barely detect it, yet strong enough to garrote a man and cut his head off in the process. With Sardaukar, you must scan them, scope them, both reflex and hard ray. Cut off every scrap of body hair, and when you're through, be certain you haven't discovered everything. I've put down next to this, underneath this, that an enemy that you cannot safely disarm cannot safely be held. And so the Sardaukar, all sorts of things going on there. False toenails or two, or fingernails, fake teeth, wire in the hair that's like monofilament. Very deadly bunch of geezers, these, but you don't really want to lock them up, do you? Unless you make sure they're defanged, I suppose is the word I would use. It's a bit of a culture term, isn't it? So that was just my wee point about that one there. There's Lord Krug saying, hey all. Hey, hi Lord Krug, thanks for joining us. We're pushing on with this enormous chapter. How are we doing? Still a fair bit to go. Goodness gracious, but we're through the bulk of it, I think. And of course, here's the correct response, I think, from Korba, is then we best kill him. But Paul shook his head, looking at Gurney. No, I want them to escape. So information, control of information. Is what this is all about here, I think, and communication, I suppose. No, I want them to escape. Gurney stared at Sire. He breathed. Yes, your man here is right. Kill those prisoners at once. Destroy all evidence of them. You've shamed Imperial Sardaukar. When the Emperor learns that, he'll not rest until he has you over a slow fire. Again, the pragmatism of kill those prisoners at once is from Gurney. The Emperor is not likely to have that power over me, however, is what Paul responds. He spoke slowly, coldly. Something had happened inside him while he faced the Sardaukar. So we do get these little moments of Paul, sort of sudden changes. A sum of decisions had accumulated in his awareness, we're told here. And we start to sort of get a gist of what's going on. Paul asks Gurney this: Gurney, are there many guildsmen around Raban? And Gurney straightened and his eyes narrowed. Your question makes no. And he's cut off. Are there? And this Paul barked at him. The young pup is a dog. and I like to point out, by the way, that Paul Atreides is based on one of many heroes, with a lot of them, and quite a few from Greek mythology, not just one or two. Barking, the dog association within ancient Greece is Achilles. By the way, is often compared to a dog by just about everyone else, I think, in the Iliad. But the barking, I think that there is another demonstration to Gurney that the young pup is a grown-up dog of war, and it's interesting that he speaks to Gurney that well, but maybe it's time is of the essence. Maybe it's got something to do with his prescient vision. Gurney says, Arrakis is crawling with guild agents. They're buying spice as though it was the most precious thing in the universe. I thought it was the most precious thing in the universe. Why else do you think we ventured this far into? It is the most precious thing in the universe to them. Again, Paul, that's me commenting before I get catch up with my own notes. It is the most precious thing in the universe to them. He looked towards Stilgar and Chani, now crossing the chamber towards him, and we control it, Gurney. The Harkonnens control it, Gurney protested. And here we go. The people who can destroy a thing, they control it. We've talked about this before. It's a fundamental here within, I suppose, the ecological aspect of Dune. And I would describe this as a mindless philosophy. It is stupid. And the people who can destroy a thing are not the people who can control it. In this sense, though, we understand that this is the aspect of hydraulic despotism, for example. We're seeing this all over Europe at the minute with the Gazprom Russian gas pipelines. Anyone who's looked at my PhD videos will see that within the ecological chapter of Frank Herbert, and this was done back in 2000, we commented about this back then, which is interesting. Frank says, Doc, who was the figure you were linking Aramsham to again in relation to Snake? Aramsham is just so Frank read Frank Herbert uses a lot of Arabic terms. Linguistically, he grabs stuff from all over the world, lots and lots of different languages. The language of the Imperium, for example, is Gaelic, which is a good one. A lot of people, it sounds a bit like Galactic, it's Gaelic. Interestingly enough, the Celtic languages. Aramsham, just back to my notes, Captain Aramsham's the name of the Imperial Sardaukar. So taking his name, it was Shamaran, I think, was the thing that I was looking at. Bear with me a wee second, and I'll check the spelling, and I will give you. There's a drama series called that. Let's just do the search. Okay. Here we go. Here's a link, Frank. Just pop that in there. That's just Wikipedia. It's Shamaran, the ancient mythical creature, half woman, half snake, originating in, there's a wee illustration there, in Armenian, Indo-Iranian, and Turkish folklores. So it's just breaking up the linguistic, the etymology of the Persian that makes up the name. Literally means the king of snakes, is what we were saying. But of course, it's a female snake demon, isn't it? This kind of thing. Jewel-headed, creature with a crown on each head, possessing a human female head on one end and a snake's head on the other, possibly representing a phallic figure. The human part is also decorated with a large necklace. There we go. Showers attested in the story of Yemliha, an underground queen from the 1001 Nights, 1001 Arabian Nights, and in the Kamas Nemi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Her story seems to be present in the eastern part of the Anatolian Peninsula and southeastern and eastern Turkey, comprising areas of Kurd, Arab, Assyrian, and Turkish communities. It just goes on to, yeah, I'll let you read away it in your own leisure there. There's often many variations of these kind of things. But basically our good captain, our good Sardaukar Imperial captain's name is her name swapped. And Frank does it. He likes to do. Okay, it's where do the names come from? Occasionally, they're a lot of the time they're mythological. There are names of other science fiction authors hidden in the book, I think, as well. We found one so far. So yeah, anytime we hit anything like that, in terms of it's just to help out with the language of Dune. And I'm fascinated. Just in terms of language, my language skills are pretty poor, to be honest. But some people might not think that, but it's the truth. But etymology is really my thing. It's why I can get by in some languages. It's got nothing to do with the fact that I can speak them, because I can't. It's because I understand the words, and that there's a commonality to a lot of them, particularly with the Romance languages and things like that. So anytime we get a chance, Frank, we have a wee poke at almost every character's name is loaded in meaning within this book, and it's worth just having a look. Sometimes it's not obvious, and we might have to move things around or even stand on our heads a little bit. And that's what I think. If you understand it, excuse me, Frank has done these things, then it makes whenever you read the book, I do tend to stop and wonder what this is about. I wonder who this guy's named after. We found 3 candidates, didn't we? 3 historical candidates for Casimir Fenring, the Count. And it looks like the good Count is actually a combination of all 3, which is very interesting. The real Counts. And of course, Casimir Fenring is very similar to Fenrir as well. Fenrir the wolf. Where are we? You're my prisoners. You submitted to me, whether you live or die is of no importance. So take them away. Oh, sorry, I've gone on to the page there. Apologies. So yeah, very important. This, I suppose. He who controls the spies controls the universe. We all know that. He who can destroy a thing controls a thing. The people who can destroy a thing, they control it. It depends on what you think control is. People who can destroy a thing don't have a thing to control. If you see what I mean, I'm just being twisted in my logic, but it's pretty much true. You blow something up, it's gone. It's of no good to man or beast. He waved a hand as silence. Further remarks from Gurney. Nodded to Stilgar. Stopped in front of Paul and Chani beside him. So Paul took the Sardaukar knife in his left hand and presented it to Stilgar. Paul took the Sardaukar knife in the left hand. Oh, sorry, just reread that. You live for the good of the tribe. Could you draw my life's blood with that knife? This is the provocation here. This is what we're heading towards, I think. And a lot of this is quite important to Frank Herbert. We've talked about Frank's feelings on the aggression within young men, violence in young men, and we'll sort of see that at the beginning of the next chapter as well. We've seen it with Jamis and what Jamis is meant to represent. And so this is a situation we've had a reunion here, and let's all be friends. But there's a situation that needs to be resolved. In fact, there's a number of situations that need to be resolved, I suppose, before the final battle, the final conflict, if you like. And of course, the nature of the leadership of this tribe is the problem. The young men want Stilgar to call, they want Stilgar and Paul to fight because they know Paul will win, and it's a wasteful thing, of course. So here we get, this is all to do with that, and it's Paul's manipulation of this against the Fremen custom. Things need to change in order to save his friend Stilgar here. So let's run through this conversation. You live for the good of the tribe. Could you draw my life's blood with that knife? And Stilgar, for the good of the tribe, and he growled. And he's not happy about this line of questioning. Then use that knife, says Paul. Are you calling me out? Hang on, I've read that wrong. Let me just say, are you calling me out? He demanded. If I do, I shall stand there without weapon and let you slay me. Stilgar drew in a quick, sharp breath. So, of course, this is one of those, how do we get this to not happen, really, from Paul's point of view, to preserve Stilgar for the good of the tribe? It seems that in all honesty, the strongest should lead the tribe. It is not the most beneficial thing, I think, for the Fremen in the first place. Stilgar's strong, but he is intelligent. He's wise. Quick, sharp breath. So you, for the good of the tribe, if you call me out, I'm going to stand here. I'm going to let you kill me. Me, your Messiah, your prophet, your, your Lisan al-Gaib, your Muad'Dib, I will let you slay me. And of course, Chani, Usul, and glanced at Gurney and back at Paul while Stilgar was weighing his words. You are Stilgar, a fighting man. When the Sardaukar began fighting here, you were not in the front of battle. Your first thought was to protect Chani. She's my niece. If there'd been any doubt of your Fedakeen handling those scum, cuts him off. Why was your first thought of Chani? It wasn't. Oh, it was of you, he admitted. Do you think you could lift your hand against me? And Stilgar begins to tremble. It's the way, muttered. It's the way to kill off-world strangers found in the desert and take their water as a gift from Shai-Hulud, yet you permitted two such to live one night, my mother and myself. Stilgar remained silent, trembling, staring at him. There's a real effect here, powerful. Ways change still. You have changed them yourself. Stilgar looked down at the yellow emblem on the knife he held. When I am Duke on Arakeen with Chani by my side, do you think I'll have time to concern myself with every detail of governing Sietch Tabr? Do you concern yourself with the internal problems of every family? Stilgar continued staring at the knife. So again, we're heading towards this plot resolution. Do you think I wish to cut off my right arm? Slowly, Stilgar looked up at him. Do you think I wish to deprive myself or the tribe of your wisdom and strength? And in a low voice, Stilgar says, the young man of my tribe, whose name is known to me, this young man I could kill on the challenge floor, Shai-Hulud willing. The Lisan al-Gaib, him I cannot harm. You knew this when you handed me the knife. So I knew it. It's a paradox, isn't it? One of Frank's little paradoxes here. These two men are caught in a catch-22, if you like. And it's a good resolution here, I think. And what we have is a pair of mature characters, really, essentially, who can be childish, obviously. I think we all can. But it's going to be a good demonstration to the young men of the Fremen that, Stilgar opened the hand, the knife clattered on the stone floor. Ways change. Chani, Paul says, go to my mother, send her here that her counsel will be available. And Chani interrupts him here. But you said we would go to the south. She protested. What's to the south? Why protest? It's where Jessica is, isn't it? I was wrong. The Harkonnens are not there. The war is not there. And Chani took a deep breath, accepted this as a desert woman accepted all necessities in the midst of a life involved with death. You will give my mother a message for her ears alone. Tell her that Stilgar acknowledges me, Duke of Arrakis, but a way must be found to make the young men accept this without combat. I've put violence. So Chani glanced at Stilgar. Stilgar, do as he says, growled. We both know he could overcome me, and I could not raise my hand against him for the good of the tribe. And again, I've just commented, I wonder really what is really good for the tribe, to the Fremen. Chani's treatment here is not great, I think, in terms of all things. I shall return with your mother, she says. Send her, Paul says. Stilgar's instinct was right. I am stronger when you are safe. You will remain in the siege. And she started to protest and swallowed it, basically. You'll go where you're told. I'm safer. It's, not great. Sahaya, he uses the intimate name for her. He whirled away to the right, met Gurney's glaring eyes. We're heading to the end of the chapter here, folks. Goodness gracious. A lot of action, a lot of dialogue in this one. The old new problems to be resolved, I've put for here. The interchange between Paul and Stilgar had passed as a thought since Paul's reference to his mother. And this is the bit we get here, I think. This is, again, the resolution of one of the Baron's little, what I like to call fire and forget weapons, I suppose. It nearly does its job. Your mother, Gurney says. Idaho saved us the night of the raid. He's distracted by parting with Chani, we're told here. Sorry. Right now and then Gurney says, what of Duncan Idaho, my lord? He's dead, buying us a bit of time to escape. And I've written next to this, folks, I have written that that's nonchalant and casual. And for anybody who reads 2000 AD, I have written next to it that it reminds me of Thomas de Torquemada from Nemesis the Warlock, who's very casual about people's deaths. It's just, I will meditate on your death sometime. He's a bit like that. He's very funny about it. But he's dead, buying us a bit of time to escape. A little bit nonchalant, a little bit distracted. And Gurney's thoughts here. The she-witch, alive. Big exclamation mark. The one I swore vengeance against, alive. Another exclamation mark. And it's obvious Duke Paul doesn't know what manner of creature gave him birth. The evil one, exclamation mark. Betrayed his own father to the Harkonnen, exclamation mark. That many exclamation marks in one paragraph is, especially in someone's thoughts. This is Bangaria, as we call it. But yes, the she-witch, the one I swore vengeance against, alive. Paul doesn't know what kind of creature gave birth to him. The evil one betrayed his own father to the Harkonnen. And there we go. So obviously we know what's happened in the past with the Harkonnen, with Dr. Yui being the real traitor, all of this, but really to sow the seeds. The whole point was to sow the seeds of mistrust with Jessica. And it's worked all this time later. It did infect Gurney. And this will be resolved, but it's an interesting one. And of course, it's got building more and more tension for us. And his anger building up to rage. We get a point of view switch here. Paul pressed past him and jumped to the ledge and glanced back and noted the wounded and dead removed. He thought bitterly that this was another chapter in the legend of Muad'Dib, and it is literally another chapter in the legend of Muad'Dib. Paul's thoughts here is, I didn't even draw my knife, but it'll be said of this day, I slew 20 Sardaukar by my own hand. Gurney followed with Stilgar, stepping on ground he did not feel. The cavern, its yellow glow globes, forced out of his thought by rage. Rage. Gurney's thoughts, the she-witch alive, while those she betrayed are bones in lonesome graves. I must contrive it that Paul learns the truth about her before I slay her. And that's the end of our chapter, folks. And goodness gracious, it took me months to get my notes done on that. And it's a good one. It is. It's as I said, I had a bit of a wall with it. When we're talking about the rage, the next epigraph for the next chapter, by the way, which is a thing that's important to Frank, I think. how often it is that the angry man rages denial of what his inner self is telling him, you know. And of course, we're going to get this resolved with the next chapter. In terms of the book club, folks, I'll be getting to work on it as soon as possible, pretty much straight away. Got a few things to do. I'm off to get injections into my hands tomorrow. But fingers crossed, because I do my notes by hand. We'll be getting at it, and we'll hopefully be back when the next chapter is done. We'll announce it, and we'll go with the next Thursday after that, rather than saying, "Oh, we'll do it every week." A lot of these chapters are huge in terms of the note taking, the way we work at it. So the next one's that one there was 18 pages. The next one's 14 and a half, and then we've got 11 pages for 45. What's that? 10 pages for 46. So a couple of nice shorter ones. 10 and a half for 47. And we hit the last chapter. What have I got here? 29 pages. It's going to be a monster of a book club thingy there. So there we go. Through another chapter, folks, with all our notes made, etc., etc. I hope you're enjoying this. It wasn't probably not the ideal way to run this book club, but at the end of the day, when it's all put together, hopefully, with everybody's contributions and questions and so on, it'll be something that maybe you can run through anytime you feel the need to read the book and be of help to for anybody who's going to become a first-time reader of Dune. We will be leaving it up there permanently. And as usual, we've always got, no matter what, I never run out of questions with this book, which is why I come back to it so often. I think this will be my last read. It's of Dune because there's so much more to be getting on with. But I have read this damn thing. I don't know how many times I have lost count. Let's just have a wee look at some of your comments, folks. We got through that not too badly. Whew. Good to get back on the horse, isn't it? Let's see. Children of the Okay, I got to back up a wee bit. The mouse on my wheel mouse on my mouse the wheel on my mouse has gone demented. Fremen Column says the Children of the Moon, band name too. Cool. That's correct. Children of the Moon. What is the significance of Paul asking Stilgar to use a Sardaukar knife instead of his own Chris knife to kill him? It's a good point, Cynthia. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. What is the significance of Paul asking Stilgar to use a Sardaukar knife instead of his own Chris knife to kill him? Frank's. I'll read ahead, Cynthia. I'm going to think about it. Let's see what everyone else says. Frank says, I was also just thinking of the knife, Cynthia. I feel there's a fitting analogue for the yellow coil of imperial color and golden lion crest, which is escaping me. Well, obviously the knife is a symbol of the emperor. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to think about that one. Analog drawn from one of the many mythologies Frank weaves into the story. Perhaps this Sardaukar, Cynthia says, perhaps this Sardaukar knife has a new meaning because one just like it was used by Aramsham to kill his friend. Now Stilgar must think about whether he would kill his friend. That's a good one. I think I like that, Cynthia. Still waiting to see a hint of St. Ali in the new trailers. I think they've done this story dirty, Sigh. Now, the question is if she's not in it at all, would be pretty bad. I think there's a question of whether Casimir Fenring's going to be in the film at all. You could pluck him out, to be honest with you. And we talk about the little important characters as well. If Ali is not in Dune, then they shouldn't call it. They need to stick Denis Villeneuve's Dune on top of it, don't they? Because it's not Frank Herbert's. There's a lot about it I think that Frank would be maybe not too happy with, but at the same time, I think he'd be delighted as well that it was turned into a movie. Yes, maybe there's a wounding, healing, poison remedy duality going on in the knife as well. Lion, snake, Ra, and Isis. Very good, Frank. Very good indeed. Yeah, there are a number of female serpent deities and mythological beings. There's a whole bunch of them, aren't there? There's Lamias, for example, is one. I think there's some in Eastern mythology. Use a Sardaukar knife takes away the privilege of using a Chris knife. Kill me not as a. It's Others telling us there was very great points, folks. Great points. Color yellow. Yellow's an interesting color, I suppose. So we have Cynthia suggesting that the new meaning, because one like it was just used by Aramsham to kill his friend. It's the same knife, isn't it? I think. Oh no! It's the knife that was thrown. You're quite right. It is one like it. Stilgar must think about whether he would kill his friend. So absolutely, a Sardaukar kills his buddy. There's that parallel there. And Herbert does a lot of these things, so I absolutely think that's absolutely valid, Cynthia. Frank, the wounding, healing, poison, remedy, duality going on in the knife as well. Lion, snake, rat, and Isis. Probably a poisoned weapon as well. And I like what Bab says there. Telios Dawiz says to use a Sardaukar knife takes away the privilege of using a Chris knife. Kill me not as a Fremen, but as a duke, perhaps. Not as the Lisan al Gaib, just as that a man, I think they're all very, very good points. Excellent. And also that it's a poison knife as well, but like holding maybe a poison chalice. I think almost everybody's knives are the Fremen are got anticoagulants on them generally, don't they? But everybody's fond of their poison. It's a very good question. I don't think I could add anything more to that. Cynthia, to be honest with you, I think what yourself and everyone else has presented is pretty good. On having a wee look at the symbolism of that. Yeah. And there's a lot of little details within this chapter fleshing out. They're not massive, but they're fleshing out previous pictures. If you like, we get another bit more sense of the Sardaukar and how they operate. We get a good that I think the process of the smugglers going about attempt at spice mining at the start gives us a little bit more about the factories, the spice factories, this kind of thing. And I don't know. I thought this was quite a long and busy chapter. And when I was trying to get stuff out of it, really, some chapters you can pull all sorts of little curiosities out of them. When they're like this, they tend to be action and dialogue heavy. It's hard to find stuff that kind of just helps our understanding, if you like, or little curiosities, but helps our understanding of Dune and see what Frank's about. But yeah, we're rage, etc. But absolutely, ways change. The knife clattered on the stone floor in the end. It's dropped. Cast aside. And again, Stilgar also is fixated on this knife for a bit. He's staring at it a lot. And of course, it's presented within the whole nature of how the Fremen kind of choose their leaders. I suppose their political nature is based up on this kind of nonsense, the survival of the fittest. We've talked a little bit about the priesthood at Nemi. Let me see if I can find you a link for this, folks. Right, there we go. The temple of there we go. That's what I'm after. Have a look at this. I hope to go here one day. I've been down to Rome, and it's not too far south of Rome. And this is the temple of Diana Nemerensis at Nemi. Used to be a kind of a quite close to kind of basically what you would call a Roman holiday resort, if you like, for the Romans. It's a pilgrimage site on the Italian peninsula. Temple complex covering an area of 45,000 square kilometers. Now, erected around 300 BC and dedicated to the goddess Diana. preceded by now. What we're talking about within this myth, actually, or it's not really a myth. This is actual proper practice. Is the sacred grove which stood there, and if you check out that, it's very interesting. For anyone who's into mythography, almost the entire basis of Fraser's The Golden Bough starts off with a fascinating discussion about the priesthood at Nemi. To become the priest at Nemi, you kill the previous priest, and you're safe. So, for example, if you're a slave in ancient Rome, and you being a slave in Rome was pretty good, to be honest with you. But if you decided you wanted to escape, your best bet was, if you could, to survive, would be to make it to the grove, the sacred grove at Nemi, and kill the priest there, instantly becoming the next priest, and the Romans wouldn't touch you. Yeah. Wounding, healing, poison, remedy, duality going on in the knife as well, in line with the snake. Yes. Nice. Frank, what we're going to do shortly is I did a wee set of videos called I didn't really know how to go about it, but I just called it the Pelopids in Dune. And it was looking at, I suppose, particularly the core stories around the House of Atreus, but these stories, the family as the Pelopids, are, if you like, the descendants of Pelops. And what we were thinking, so I kind of explained it, but then I didn't really go on further. I gave one example of something that happens in Dune that's from the Iliad, for example. And it's to do with the sacrifice of Leto II, really. But what I hadn't done was really go, right, let's take... I wanted to go on with this, and I think I'm going to do another episode, but what I was actually going to probably follow up with this is saying, like, right, okay, let's do this. Let's go. Let's take Paul, and let's just go and list them all. Who's this guy based on? Here we go. Here's Leto. Who's he? And grab, of course, I run with the Baron being pretty much Laius. The Baron Vladimir Harkonnen is based on Laius, who's the father of Oedipus. And others, you know, I mean, and I actually think just maybe put them all together and let people see, but there's so many for Paul. As I said, I've been reading a bit of Mallory. I read stuff on the matter of Britain a fair bit, and it's been a long time since I got myself a nice new book. If you give me 1 wee second, folks, I'll be right back, and I'll just grab it for you quickly before we finish up. Oh, dear, There we go. So this is a bit different. This is called this is the Winchester manuscript of Le Morte d'Arthur, which I picked up recently. Sorry. There we go. Dude, a little bit gutted to find that this is actually abridged. The Modern Spelling Edition is a new abridgment by Helen Cooper, based on the authoritative Winchester manuscript, and represents what Mallory wrote more closely than the version printed by William Caxton. So this is very much a new work, and it's pretty good. The author has made a few decisions. Sorry, the translator has made a few decisions. That this bit goes on a bit. It's like a list, and I don't think you can be bothered to read it, so I'll leave it out. But at least she lets you know when she's doing it, and it's got particularly good notes with it. So for any King Arthur fans, I'm sure you all know Le Morte d'Arthur. This is a new, this is the definitive English version by Sir Thomas Mallory. Now, this one's from Oxford Press, Oxford Word Classics. So I've been reading away. I'm about a quarter of the way through, I think. I've read Arthur and Lucius and the Emperor of Rome, of Nineveh and Morgana Le Fay, The Wedding of King Arthur, Balin and Balin, How Uther Begot King Arthur, But to hit the noble tale of Sir Lancelot du Lake, so I'm loving it. It's great. But I've kind of put it aside a little bit to focus on Xi Shen Lu's trilogy because we've seen a trailer drop for that recently. But I've been at it for a wee while. They're quite thick books, but for anybody who really loves their science fiction, I'm not finished it yet, but I'm on the last part of the trilogy. Is it Time Remembered Past? I think The Three-Body Problem, Dark Forest, and Death's End. Excellent. Wow, very good. And I have a lot to say about some of this stuff, actually, so we'll have to get on to an episode. Pop on to a live broadcast, possibly this weekend. I said I'm off to the hospital early in the morning, but hopefully my hands won't be too... Hopefully I'll be able to write when I get back. Stilgar stares at the emblem on the hilt of the knife. I'm now wondering if this is the moment he understands how the Empire looks at Paul. The whole chapter is about who belongs to whom. There's possession, isn't it? There's a lot of... We pointed out the possessiveness of the friendship. There's the possession of Chani, the protection of Chani. It's a good point, Cynthia. How does an empire work? And of course, the lion is an imperial symbol. Well, the lion would be most associated with, I suppose we've got the British royal family, and there are 3 lions. And of course, Alexander the Great would be represented by the lion. He's the Lion of Macedon, isn't he? I always thought lions seen as kingship, whereas the eagle is imperial, emperors, if you like. But absolutely possessive. And Gurney's his man, isn't he? It's and I've very much thought the words that Frank chose here in this chapter with Gurney, the real suggestion of a Ronin, masterless wandering samurai, if you like, which is a good way of thinking a bit about adrift on the waves or adrift on the dunes, sand dunes and all. Frank loves those analogues between water and sand, doesn't he? So it's a good chapter, and it's an intriguing one. We're getting through. We're chapter 44 next. We have Jessica, as I said. Babs, we've been having a bit of a chat about Atalanta, and we'll get to have a wee look at that. And it's definitely worth having a natter about Jessica. I think she's a great character. And in terms of characters like Jessica, within, I suppose, the world of literature, that we don't find too many. We're getting them now in the modern world, I suppose, but characters like her are rare. Female characters like Jessica are very rare. And I tend to, when I look at her and most of the women in the Dune series, I tend to think of women like the women from Troy. If you know the sort of the Greek plays, the various female characters back then. Jessica's pretty interesting. Sounds like a great idea for a video. As you point out, Dune opens up so many doorways to different mythologies and symbols. A great idea for a video, Frank. It would be an entire series. It's ridiculous. There's even while we've been doing stuff on here, there were people looking at the Jacurutu myth. I think some of the guys, the Dune fans from the South American channels, and which was pretty intriguing. And of course, I think I talked a wee bit about it's a type of owl, isn't it? And I think this is the myths, some of the myths that are within Children of Dune. We have South American, we have North American, we have Asian, if you want for a very broad term. We have classical Greek and Roman. We have Arabian. And I would say that we have pre-Islamic Arabian myths as well as post-Islamic, if that makes sense. Yeah, there's he's well invested in mythologies, our Frank, I think, and I suppose if you think about the time when he was writing and how you would learn about this stuff, it's by reading books and things like that. There's no internet, this kind of thing. Frank says your content on an earlier mention of PKD brings to mind how he is similar in his interweaving of ancient mythological and or divine figures in his work. For example, Sophie and Elijah in the Valis trilogy. Yes. Been a long time since I'm actually at the point, Frank, where I've read every single Philip K. Dick book, science fiction book. I've got 3 that I haven't read. My wife used to buy me. My wife says to me, "What do you want for Christmas?" Secondhand books, please, is my answer. So I want all the Philip K. Dicks. Get me anything I don't have. So I've read through. I've been reading Philip K. Dick since I was about, I don't know, 6 or 7. Love him, absolutely love him. Got a whole shelf of stuff here. We've got some interesting books on him. Of course, the Valis subject. There's a good book here, Frank, on it's called Divine Invasions. Not the novel, The Divine Invasion. Divine Invasion is a life of Philip K. Dick by Lawrence Sutin. I think that is. I have another one that I picked up recently by Emmanuel Carrere called I Am Alive and You're Dead. A journey inside the mind of Philip K. Dick, but I have not had a chance to read it. I've got some other stuff, interestingly, on Blade Runner and stuff here, but I do love Philip K. Dick. Yeah, the whole I Ching thing is using a form of oracle. If you're really into Philip K. Dick, if you can get through a good biography of him, whoa, does it transforms your understanding of the man. Let's see, Valis, the Divine Invasion. What's the third one? Is it the 3? It's not. Is it? Hang on. God, there's my memory going. It's not the 3 stigmata. Is it Divine? Oh, the funny thing is, some of my Philip K. Dick books are quite old, and I'm hoping to do a fair bit of content on them. To be honest with you, Frank. The real problem for me is they're that old. The writing's gotten really tiny. Well, it's not gotten really tiny. It's really tiny. And I might have to pick up some new editions. Let's see. Simulate, Transmigration. My brain, I'm having a brain fart. I'm trying to remember. Valis, Divine Invasion. What's the third one? Hang on, I'm going to have a nosy quickly. I'm sure you know. I should know, bet you I'll kick myself. Transmigration of Timothy Archer. There we go. I was thinking it was the 3 stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. I do like the 3 stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. I read it's unfinished, I think. And the Island Daylight. The Island Daylight. Oh, yes. Sorry, just having a wee quick nosy here, Andrew Butler's suggests that they might have become fascinated by Dante's Divine Comedy as a form of theophany. In his final complete work, The Transmigration of Timothy Archer, his narrator Angel Archer shows similar appreciation for Dante's masterpiece, which suggests that this argument may have some merit. Claims about possible content. I don't know. I wonder what your favorite Philip K. Dick book is, Frank. Mine is a strong, always a strong favorite for me is Ubik. And I've been thinking about putting together some top 10s for you guys as well, because I keep getting asked about it. But if what's my favorite single science fiction book? It's probably Ubik. I was getting that totally. That's the unfinished one. I was writing it as death. I don't know too much about that one, Frank. But by the looks of it, it's. I think there was a suggestion that somebody has maybe tried to finish it. Maybe. Frank says, do you have a spelling or link for that Latin American myth? Oh, Jack Urutu. I'm spelling it in the Dune series. Jack Urutu, I think, is that. Hang on, go have a quick check for you. But this is the good thing. Jacurutu is, let's just go to this one. Within that context, go. Bubo virginianus, the great horned owl, also known as the tiger owl. And I think it's a form, it's got something to do with that as well. Something to find out about the jackfruit. Yeah, animals, myths that generally involve animals, or we tend to call them fables. That's it. But oh my goodness, it was some of the. I remember do we search for it. It was some of the guys. I think it was on Twitter, and they were chatting about these South American myths. I sort of let them know that the jacuruti had something to do with an owl, just in terms of what I knew about it. But that again, that's just me. I'm working with words. But we must have a wee nosy into it. I think I read about it at the time. It was something possible to do with vampires. Babs has got to go catch my night bus. Night, y'all. Night, Babs. Be safe. Hope you get home okay. And thanks very much for joining us as always. Gurney is an Atreides man. Babs was just saying before she's that he continues the Atreides Harkonnen feud while amongst the smugglers. Yeah, revenge. Paul was at House Atreides. Gurney returns to Caladan with Jessica, also still an Atreides. Yeah, he's an Atreides man, isn't he? It's he's going to go a bit native with his master, I think, because his master has. But I suppose the rage is overwhelming, isn't it? The anger. Again, looking at that, I suppose the whole what Frank thinks about aggression and young men. Gurney's not a young man here. If you know what I mean. But it often goes, I suppose it goes badly wrong. It's rage is an overpowering thing that stops you from thinking. It physically shuts down parts of your brain when you're that angry. Makes you stupid. So we are going to see Gurney kind of do a few things, but we have, I suppose, the precursor, the setup that he wants Paul to know before he does the deed. And in that sense, it'll give an opportunity for it to not happen, I suppose. But yeah, we're accelerating towards the end here, and it's goodness gracious, it's been a bit of a journey, hasn't it? So that's us with 43. We are into our fourth notebook, these that we're filling, and I'm hoping, I don't think we'll get to 5, but I'm pretty certain I'm going to fill this notebook completely. So 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 5 more chapters of the book to go, folks. And so we're going to have a look at the first appendix as well with Pardo Kynes. That is a little mini adventure as well. Once we get to that, we'll take a specific episode on that, and then I think we can have a wee run through the other appendices. And as I said, whenever we get there, we want to have a look at a very important line at the end of the story. And I'd love to know at this point what you think about it. And I think it's the most important line in Dune, as I do keep pointing it out. And it's not in the story. The most important line, I think, the biggest mystery in Dune is this. It's at the end of Appendix 3, just for a little bit of a teaser. In the face of these facts, one is led to the inescapable conclusion that the inefficient Bene Gesserit behavior in this affair was a product of an even higher plan of which they were completely unaware. And I think we've talked about, I suppose, the whole plan of Zeus in classical mythology of getting rid of all of the heroes that he's given birth to. Is the plan is to start the Trojan War, But there we go. Well, listen, folks, we've been at it for 3 hours. It's been great to be back. We've had a bit of a rough year, and as I said, we wanted to come back at this with the right attitude, not to be a bit mopey or any of that kind of stuff, and hopefully have the right sense of fun. I'm really glad that things have gone quite well tonight, and I've enjoyed it as always. So here's hoping to me getting the station back up and running and get the power on. And I've even written a theme tune that I might play for you on the guitar at some point. I have no idea if you could hear my wee ukulele thing, but I'll have a wee chat about that as well. That's a little nod to James Horner and and I kind of wrote a wee tune. I call it hoarderism, but it's just to make something in his style. So there we go. Bojack saying fun as always. Later all. Thank you, Bojack. Lord Crunk, awesome again. Thanks, Lord Crunk. And Cynthia saying thank you. Thank you. It's great to see you all again. For those who are new as well tonight, thank you so much for your contributions. And absolutely excellent there with the knife, by the way. Just what do you think, Ross? I think what you guys think pretty much. It was a good one, and I hadn't put much thought into it. And Frank, yeah, definitely, we're gonna go do some stuff on Philip K. Dick, because we've been getting some of the Philip K. Dick audio books. Anything that's in public domain that's of particular note of science fiction, we're trying to build up our wee station here. So Frank says, thanks all. I've been following the project for a while with great admiration. Thank you. And I've only just caught up reading the novel, so I've been looking forward to joining live for some time. That's great, Frank. Thank you very much indeed. You're absolutely welcome. And thank you very much for all your contributions this evening. It always makes it better for me anyway. It makes things go a lot easier. So listen, I'm very long-winded, and I'm going to have to keep watching the throat. So it's been a good 3 hours or so. I'm going to say good night, folks. I think this has been a bit of a success tonight. And thank you all so much. And once again, safe home wherever you're at, particularly Babs, traveling back on the night bus. And for all the rest of you, look after yourselves, take care of yourselves, no matter where you're at. And yeah, we'll see you again real soon. Thank you very much, and all the very best. Good night.